All right, everyone, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Upper Canada School Board for February 12, 2014 to order and ask that you all rise and join in the singing of our national anthem. All right, ask the director to proceed with roll call.
Trustee Buckland.
Present.
Trustee Kartner.
Present.
Trustee Garrow.
Present.
Trustee McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Vice Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee McRae. Chair Petersman.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
Student Trustee Tyler Harper.
Present.
Consent agenda items, gotta have a motion to approve. Trustee McMillan and Trustee McPherson. Nothing. Make sure you're joined in. Buckland, McAllister, McDonald,
I'm joining
and
in.
Trustee Swan. Okay, so conflict of interest. Any declarations thereof? I need a motion to move into committee of the whole. Trustee Garrow and Trustee Karkner. Okay. Move now to our accountability framework school success plan presentation, and invite Superintendent Edwards to introduce our guests tonight.
Thank you, Chair Petersman. It's my pleasure to introduce the principal of VCI, Angela Grande, and she's here tonight with her school council chair, Brian McCormick. And however, just before Angela starts and gives her report, I just want to give a brief introduction. On November the 25th and November the 26th, Superintendent Victoria Hemming and Ellen and I had the pleasure of conducting an audit at VCI for 2 days. We spent a day with Angela Grande reviewing the school data and the school success planning and plans. In the afternoon of the day when we were reviewing the data, we were joined in the afternoon by the director and also by Carol Kartner, Trustee Carol Kartner, for a student and staff assembly called We Belong at VCI. In the afternoon of the first day, during that afternoon, the director spoke to the students and staff, and his message to the student and staff that day was very impactful, and we've certainly heard that the following day during our interviews with the students. The students said during their interviews that when the director told us he loved us, they said that got our attention right away. Never had a director or someone stand up there like that and told us they loved us. And they also commented on how open and honest he came across. And I don't want to give away Angela's presentation. However, I think that you'll find that openness and the honesty, and also what the students spoke about, I think you'll find that as you look through her presentation. Looking out for each other is what makes VCI stand out. They have a very high graduation rate, and the administration and the staff continually look in the mirror and reflect on what they can do to continually improve their teaching practices. So I'd now like to invite Principal Angela Grandi to provide you with VCI's school report.
Thank you. I am pleased to be here tonight on behalf of the students, staff, families, and communities of VCI to share our story with you. VCI is located in Van Cleek Hill. We serve 13 communities, and French and English are both equally represented in our areas. We're a 9 to 12 school, and we have a 91% graduation rate that we are incredibly proud of. VCI is a community school, and our strong community involvement and our school council attests to that. Worth noting is that 31% of our grade 9s arriving at our school in September are brand new students to the Upper Canada District School Board. Besides our great staff, we have a full-time social worker, part-time nurse, and nurse practitioner on site at all times for our students. I've been the principal for the last year and a half, and for those of you who know our area, you will recognize that the current mayor, Gary Barton, is also a former VCI principal. Mindful of the board's strategic plan, sorry, I'm not moving these forward for you. Mindful of the board's strategic plan and critical success factors, we review our school success plan 3 times a year with our stakeholders. And our second and third goals really are there to support our primary goal, which is that 90% of our grade 9 students entering VCI leave us at the end of 4 years with a high school diploma. We offer extensive programming at our school. For example, our grade 9 integrated arts and technology program is new to the school this year, and that's in response to listening to our grade 8 and 9 parents and students. We also offer the advanced placement program, university chemistry, biology, and physics. And finally, I'll highlight our dual credit program. We have strong partnerships with St. Lawrence College and Algonquin College for college courses and level 1 apprenticeships. And I'd like to add that last night I found out that 3 of our students received over 90% in their college courses. As you can see, BCI has good results on the provincial literacy test with a 91% success rate in 2013. Our deferred rate for the past 5 years has had an average of 12%, which is a little more than the board and provincial average, but we're working hard to decrease that, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in my report as we move along. For first-time eligible participating students, VCI has a positive trending over time, but over the past 2 years, we've had 90% and above for both of those. Again, over time, VCI has done very well in the grade 9 academic EQA math results with a 5-year average of 88%, and this is above the board and the provincial averages. While we're not where we'd like to be with our grade 9 applied EQAO math results, we're also trending positively with a 5-year average of 47%, and again, that's above the board and the provincial average. We'd like to hear from our staff and students at VCI. And our students, through our Tell Them From Me surveys, as well as our audit, have told us that they feel very safe at VCI, and they feel that they are a part of the school and they belong there. Our staff believe that wellness is a strong focus at VCI. Our sense of being a caring and community school is a strength, but that we have room to work on communication internally and time to collaborate. In the future, we'd like to have a 90% attendance rate. Our current rate is 82%. We'd like all of our teachers to become the primary owners of student success within the classroom setting. We also want to increase attendance, academic success, and parent involvement by everyone who comes into VCI being able to see themselves represented, welcomed, and supported at our school. I've highlighted two of the challenges we face. I mentioned earlier that on average 31% of our students who arrive at our doors in September for grade 9 are brand new students of the Upper Canada District School Board. Our usually strong transitioning activities and supports for these students and their families before September can be somewhat challenging to provide. Also, making sure that 100% of our teachers have the confidence and strategies to respond to the individual needs of all of our students is definitely an area we're working on. In the past year, we have reviewed and revised our communication plan. We have just begun sticking our toe in the world of Facebook, and we have many students and staff contributors, and that's an area of growth for us right now. For resources, we have, through our 3-year data-driven planning, focused our financial and human resources on professional development. For example, our hub work to date has really focused on a collaborative inquiry approach with our grade 6, 7, and 8 teachers at Pleasant Corners Public School to look at our grade 9 applied math course and the results. And secondly, we're working to build teacher efficacy in order to develop good IEPs in individual student pages in individual courses. Under education, I'd like to highlight our Link crew. This has been a tremendous success at VCI. It's a accredited course, and our grade 9 parents and students, again through our audit, our Tell Them From Me, and a interview process we participated in last year in a review of the Link program, told us that it was definitely a program we needed to keep. Our grade 12 students, who are Link leaders, support our students in grade 9 both academically and helping them make healthy connections to VCI that will last the 4 to 5 years that they're in our building. And I think worth noting overall is our approach to wellness at VCI, because we do believe that that is a way for us to improve the learning and the experience at VCI for every student and their family in our communities. So following our grade 8 initiative, which is You Belong at VCI, we expanded this year to We All Belong at VCI to promote equity and inclusion in our school. We want the message to be to every single person who walks through our door that whether you're a student, a staff member, a family member, community member, there is a place for you at VCI, and we welcome you and we accept you, and we are an ally of you here in this building. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Comments, trustees, questions? Trustee McPherson?
Through the chair, under challenges that you face or we face, you mentioned that 31% of students entering grade 9 are unknown to staff. Why do you identify that as a challenge when I believe it's probably the case in most secondary schools? I know that you have a smaller catchment zone than some. And can you explain what you mean by unknown? Like, are they coming in that you have no past awareness of the student, or is it simply they're strangers? Maybe I'm not phrasing this right, I'm sorry.
Through you, Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
I think we have a very strong working relationship. We have one feeder school, which is Pleasant Corners. So we have a strong relationship with them in going over to that building, having their students coming over with us, working with their staff, the grade 8 students, to do whatever we need to do to make that transition as smooth as possible. So if it's a special needs student, their family circumstances, we have those things in place. Some of the students who arrive to our building in August are not people we necessarily have the same background information on. So we're not able to pre-support them. We have to do that as they arrive. You are right. Because we know so many of our students before they do arrive, we are able to concentrate on those new arrivals, but it's not our preferred way of supporting students. We really like to be proactive and offer them and their families as much as we can up front.
David, you want to add something?
Thanks, Chair. Phil Dawes, our research specialist at the back, guru, would say the vast majority of those kids that come and join at grade 9 who don't come in from Pleasant Corners come from our coterminous board that they identify VCI, and that is not new, as Angela has said, the principal. That's probably a 20-year story in that particular community. The school enjoys a very strong academic image in the community that is continuing to be that, and people see this as a potential launching place for the kids to go on to college, university, and beyond, even beyond their careers, etc. So it enjoys a really good, and it's very, and Trustee Carter will be very well supported by the community with scholarships and things that support those particular things. So they see this as they've done this, and this is a real good place to go to start the next part of their educational career. And I think that's also understood by the parents in the community as well.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. Angela, I'm glad to see the words critical success factors in the report. That's something that's very important to us. So thank you for putting that in. The question I want to ask, it's obvious that your school is doing some great things. Your teachers are doing a good job. However, do you see that as a strength or an obstacle when you have a staff that has, for lack of a better word, a winning formula in how you are attacking program? When, you know, as we move forward, we learn more about how kids learn. We learn more about the need to bring about change for engagement and so on. Do you see that in a role as an administrator as an obstacle when a school is doing well with their test scores based on what they are doing now and bringing about change? Is that a strength or a challenge for you?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, it's a strength because we've got some good strategies. We have things that we do very well. Our positive trending over time shows that we've got some good programs in place to support students. It's a weakness, you're right, sometimes, because we can all rest on our laurels and say, this is good enough. But I represent the staff when I tell you that the conversations around our staff meetings our student success meetings, which we regularly have every 2 weeks, are that those new group of students that come in every year, it's not good enough for them. We need 100% of our effort to go into them every year. And so we do look at how can we tweak, how can we do better constantly.
Yep, go ahead.
So, through you, Chair, so you're not locked into, and like, again, lack of better words, you're not locked into the formula. You see that to get better, you have to embrace change.
Yes,
Thank you.
we need to respond to the people who are coming into the building, not them responding to us.
Thank you so much.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. I really like the format. It addresses, I think, what we need to see, and it gives us a good insight at the school. I'm going to take you through some of the content that I want to ask you some questions on. My first question, though, and it's a little off topic, but you list the principals here, and I can recall Mr. Thera being so concerned with Van Cleef Hill not being able to have good basketball programs because the gym was so small. So I'm hoping that you have good basketball programs now that you have a good gym.
I'm a bit biased, I think, excuse me, through you, Chair, I'm a bit biased, I think they're exceptional.
That's great. Very good information, as I said. So I look at the first page, you give us what we need to look at. Second page, or second slide, your critical success factors, addressing what we're talking about, and then the school success plan. And your 3 goals associated to the school success plan. Your first goal is 90%. You're already at 91. Why is that your goal?
Through you, Chair. I'm going to keep going back to every year there's a new group of grade 9 students that come in. So what we've been doing has worked for the people who come into the building. We need to keep that available to every cohort that comes in. It's not going to be the same for every group every year. It is not the same. We've already made changes this year to support some students if we come into grade 9 who need some different things from us. So yes, it looks great there that we have 90%. We do have 90%. And the school, the staff, the community have worked very hard to get there, but to stay there, we need to look at the grade each year. And when we reviewed this fall as a staff, the school council, and as well with our students, we need to look at the people coming into our building this year and what do we need to do for them, so we maintain that one.
And I can appreciate that.
Go ahead,
However-
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. However, I think it's a good effort. It's a valiant effort to make sure that you do those types of things. But you have lessons learned. You have success built in. You should be able to build on success to ensure that 91, what you have, is maintained and you can grow on. That's the motivating factor to try and move forward. If you set a goal that's lower than what you're achieving now, what's the motivation?
Because we can be higher than 91%. We've looked at the numbers. We've looked at the students in our building. We can be higher than 91%. If we can be 92, we need to be 92. We can be 95, we need to be 95.
And I
Go ahead.
don't want to upset him tonight.
Definitely not.
And I applaud that, and I think that's courageous, and I think that's what needs to be told. And so if you set it at 90, you're saying that 90 is as good as we want to do. But if 92 is as good as you want to do, or 93 is as good as you want to do, I think you need to understand that and make sure that the community understands that. So look at that, evaluate it, and perhaps consider that moving forward.
I think the director wants to add something to that.
Okay.
Well, the chair gave me a slap in the ear to get involved. First of all, I think, and I agree with Vice Chair McDonald, you've done some exceptional work and you've listened, and the team that came in to work with you and to make the observations have captured the spirit and essence of the school. It's a school we're very proud of. And his reference to the fact you don't have to stand in the change room to do an out-of-bounds pass, I thought was inappropriate. They don't have to do that anymore, David, as you go through. I guess what I hear David saying, and I would agree with him, because I think as we talk at our planning meetings with the principals, we know perfectly well, Trustee McDonald, through the chair, that potentially Van Cleef Hill, Charlan, Glengarry, that are all at 90 or above right now, are going to have to move the bar up and say that we can do 95%. And I think what the principal is telling us is that they put the 90 at 91, and I guess for us, if we saw 95 there, we say, whoa, that's ambitious. But I think we have to understand we're going to have to put 95 there because we have some other schools in our board, quite frankly, and not to be disrespectful, their outstanding, courageous effort will be 80. And I'm not making things up around here. And so for us as a board, with this very deep goal of ours to have 90%, 100% satisfaction with your journey with us, we know that a VCI is probably going to have to hit the 95 because we're going to have an absolutely superb effort at another one of our schools that has a different culture, different makeup, that's going to hit 82, and their 82 is like a 95. And so I think the challenge for us, and I think we hear that from you, is that we've got to put some ambitious numbers out there. And so I think this is a good sign, and I think that we're saying the same thing here. I think what I understand, I hear the trustees saying to me is, be bold, put it out there. Say next year's group, we've got 91 here, and we're going to raise the bar as we go through. And quite frankly, I believe with the 100 years of success in that community with academics, is that won't offend anybody in the community. So.
Hello?
Trustee Swan?
Oh, I apologize. I just thought I
okay.
got cut off.
Trustee McDonald?
So I want to go to, I'm not sure what slide it is, student and staff voice. And I appreciate the information that's here, and I think you've identified how you get the information. On the information that you share with us as far as the 72% of students and the 90% feel safe at school, how does that information, or is that information covered in the actions you're taking? Are you addressing those things in your actions that you're taking, which are on your last two slides? What are you doing, I guess, to raise the bar for 72%, to get it to 73 or 74 or 80% of students to feel safe?
Well, we've launched through you, Chair, we've launched this We Belong at VCI program to send that message out that we all belong. So we've had some school-wide initiatives, like the pledge launch we had on November 25th. That's a big item. As a staff, we have looked at our students, and we've developed I think we've revisited from previous times, a Save One Student. So we've asked our staff members to look over our list of students. That's the great thing about being a smaller high school, and look at students we've identified through our SST program or through our social worker who are not connecting with our building, who are not feeling that sense of belonging we'd like them to have. And for those people to informally form a mentorship with those students. We also, this year, our LINK program actually meets with our grade 9 students once to twice a week for 20 minutes and not just addresses their academic concerns and challenges, but also with that sense of belonging. We've initiated across our curriculum as well as across the wellness initiatives, a healthy, balanced lifestyle, mental health initiatives that would work on helping students feel that they belong in our building. So we've put, except for the big launch in November, I can't tell you one thing that this is what we've done. I think we've tackled it as a larger issue that we're putting smaller initiatives in place to chip away at that 28% of students who may not feel that way.
Okay, go ahead.
And you're tell them from me survey, is that done on an annual basis?
We do it 2 to 3 times a year, depending on the year. And
So you're able to track some of the things that are, with some of the initiatives you're taking, you're able to see if there's any movement associated to those.
yes, we are. And we share that information with our students when it comes back. And we build initiatives based on the information for that and our culture scan. And we get our student leadership council as well as our LINK crew involved in what do we need to put in place for students, by students, with our support that will help more students feel that they belong to our building.
Thank you.
Trustee Buckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate Principal Grandy. It's quite a cogent presentation, and it's providing us the capable and progressive leadership that in this new era of accountability framework, and it is leading to individual student success and total school success. Thank you very much, Principal Grandy.
Trustee Karkner?
Through you, Chair, I'd like to thank Principal Grandy for being here and Chair McCormick. A good presentation, very informative and very true. I'm behind that 100% because I'm in the school a fair amount and it is a welcoming place. And I've seen some of the sports going on and it's great not to have to go into the change room to volley that ball or to serve that ball. So thank you.
Trustee Garrow?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I guess I was looking at the report on bullying. What did you do to bring down bullying in that? Because at one time it was quite pronounced. It was everywhere. Maybe just give me an idea of some of the things that you put in place.
I'm going to go back, through you, Chair, I'm going to go back again to our LINK program.
Yeah.
Especially with our grade 9s coming in, it establishes positive relationships, mentorships, a safe space. We, through our staff, our modeling every day, our staff handbook, our student handbook communication, we send that message out that we don't tolerate bullying in our building. Can we wipe it out 100%? But certainly the message is that we don't. The message is that every adult in the building you can approach if you feel you're being bullied or somebody is bullying you. And I believe through our Tell Them From Me feedback, students are saying to us they know that they can tell an adult in the building and that action will be taken. We had guest speakers in as well to talk to the group about bullying, and we have Garfield Newman coming in. Some of you may be familiar with him from our equity and inclusion presentations. He's coming in to speak to our students and our community in the evening about acceptance, about everyone having a place. So that's our message. And this message of we all belong is very powerful in our building.
Supplementary?
Go ahead.
Just would you be able to share that with us? Because you're revising your student and your staff handbook. I think that if it's just maybe sharing it, because what I would try to do is share it to others that have come about, you know, and see that it's like Mark Twain and the Tom Sawyer defense, the whole thing. Okay, thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'd be happy to share what we have.
Any other comments or questions? I have a question about your OSSLT. One of the things that we hear sometimes when we talk to schools that may not have such a successful OSSLT rate is that they find that the kids don't take it very seriously, or that the kids are opting to take it as a course following that. So how are you, this must not be the case in your school because your rates are so high. So what are you doing to ensure that, to get this success rate that you're getting?
Through you, Chair. I think we're fortunate as a school in the community that we live in that education is highly valued. So that's a start. As a school, we have a strong literacy team that is cross-curricular, that meets on a regular basis. We do cross-curricular literacy activities in every course in the school, and we do them both semesters. So it's not just a one-time, we're leading up to the test, we're all going to do a literacy activity. It's our daily practice of implementing those literacy activities so students are familiar. We have a after-school program. We have, our literacy team is made up of teachers who are not just the English teachers in the building. So students see literacy and literacy activities as something outside the English classroom. We have a DEAR program, Drop Everything and Read, that we do 20 minutes a day. And we surveyed our students, again through the Tell Them For Me. It was one of our open-ended questions to ask them about that. And they value that program, and they value the opportunity to read. So those are some of the specific things that we've put in place. It's not just a one-time practice for us to get ready for the test.
When you run that program of the Drop Everything and Read, what are they reading?
Through you, Chair, we have magazines, we have newspapers, some read their textbooks, some are reading novels, some are reading information on electronic devices, so iPads, whatever. So a variety of things. And all the adults in the building drop everything and read as well. We model the behavior we want to see.
Okay. In your Getting to Know Us slide, which I like the way that you presented that, but I'm interested, we have sort of an idea in our head what the graduation rates are out there in the field, but I don't really have a sense of what our attendance rates are. This says 82. Is that good? Is that, maybe somebody can help us understand?
I want to be at 90s.
David or superintendent, somebody want to answer that?
This is a brand new look at this, is potentially going back for the senior team to look at the accountability framework. And it's the beginning of, really it's a beginning question that we're putting out there. We're also going to be looking at the staff attendance and so forth to take a look at this. It's beginning, and I think you're going to see that Phil and Victoria and the senior team shape these audits and ask the questions. We're going to be able to just draw a line in the sand and say what it means. This particular time, I can be very honest with you, I'm not sure where that would stand over 23 high schools. But we're going to have that number. We actually can get the number through Power School like today. What's it mean?
It used to be on our portal, right? Used to have that data there, so I don't know whether it's still there. Okay. Seems to me there was one other question that I had. I'll have to come back to it. Anybody else? Trustee McAllister?
Thank you, Chair. Angela, I think the Atlantic Hill community has every right to be proud of Atlantic Hill Collegiate Institute and the staff and the students and the work that you do there. So please don't take my question the wrong way. When I look at your school success goals, there are 3 of them. And if I were to substitute VCI for BCI or TIS or any other high school or any other school, they would be almost, they could be identical. I'm wondering, and yet I know you have illustrated to us how specific some of your programs are. I'm just wondering why you haven't been a bit more precise in the statement of your goals.
Through you, Chair. This is our first attempt this year to move to a newer model of having 3 goals, the format that's available to us. The other plan was quite lengthy, lots of detail, lots of things, and we felt as a school that wasn't really manageable. So what you're seeing there is our first attempt at moving into a different way of creating our school success plans. We did it in the fall, we did it with staff, we talked to students. It probably, when we do this in the next few weeks again, and by June, will not be the same thing that you see there. It was paring down 4 to 5 pages of goals to something that this is, as I said, we look at it 3 times a year because it's not a stagnant document, and we need to change it. And certainly your feedback this evening as a group is important for me to take back, and we need to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Just as I just looked it up on Dashboard Light, and the comparison number is 78. So 82 is 4% better than 78. So that's good. if that's it, thanks very much. Appreciate you taking time to come and visit with us. Thanks, Susan, for introducing Van Cleek Hill to us. And we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Okay. You need a minute to upload a video?
The enrollment piece. Right
Okay. All right, so our next item is the update on Charter E47, Safe and Learning and Belonging. And Mr. Dawes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased tonight to be joined by my two colleagues for this crew charter, Marnie Lindsay, who's principal at Vanier School, and Jeff Trasick, who's principal of TR Leger. And this is our report on the E47 crew charter, which is called the Safe, Belonging, and Learning Charter. We've been working at this now for over a year. It's been a very engaging process that we've worked through. So we've found some very interesting information that we want to share with you tonight. It's been a real collaborative effort on our part. I've enjoyed working with these two immensely, and kind of the same way that we've worked throughout the year, we got our heads together to talk about how we'd like to present tonight's report, and we automatically came to a consensus as to how it should be done. And we agreed that Marnie would start things off by giving you some context and the methodology of the approach that we use to gather the information that we're going to present to you tonight. I'm going to follow up with an overview of our findings as they relate to the enrollment reporting part of the report. And Jeff is going to wrap things up by giving you the overview of the findings from the interview team that went out across the system and gathered more anecdotal data from the school perspective and our school leaders. And he'll also wrap things up for you by taking you through the conclusions of the report. So with that, I'll turn things over to Marnie. Thank you.
Okay. As we're all aware, we're in an extremely competitive environment in Eastern Ontario for our students, and we're also in a culture of declining enrollment. There are regular and significant numbers of students that transfer between boards, and there's also a commonly accepted belief within Upper Canada that our coterminous board routinely encourages the transfer of its highest need students to our Upper Canada schools. The purpose of our charter was to review the circumstances and the extent to which students transfer between our board and our coterminous boards. In order to work through our charter, we have taken a fairly interconnected process of data collection. We've had a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. Firstly, we have reviewed data from our student information management system. That is data through our ESIS and ONSIS reporting. We looked at a variety of enrollment-based reports, and we analyzed them to gain an accurate perspective of the actual number of students that we're talking about and how they move between our schools. Secondly, we undertook a review of OSR tracking records within all of our Upper Canada schools. An OSR is our Ontario student record, and every student enrolled in the province of Ontario has this record. And it transfers with students between schools and between boards upon written request from a new school. So we were able to gain from each school within the board their tracker data, which is like a logbook that tracks where the student previously was attending and what date they entered their new school. Our next process was to work with an interview team. We had 4 excellent folks work with us. Chris Hanna, Vice Principal of Westminster School, Trevor Holm, Vice Principal of TR Leger, Brad O'Neill from Wolford, and Doug Searle from St. Lawrence. And we went out across the board and we interviewed every secondary principal within the board. And we also interviewed a number of elementary schools, at least one elementary principal from each family of schools, and we focused on the schools that had the highest number of students in and out. The purpose of those interviews was to gain a deeper perspective of the process used in the maintenance of OSR tracking methodology, and also to get some very specific feedback and some stories of the students that were moving between our schools. On page 2 of our report, the specific questions that were asked of the principals in the interview sessions are outlined for you. We've had an opportunity to meet as a team and debrief, and we have included the findings from our interview process in our report as well. And throughout our charter process, we've been able to meet quite regularly with the director's office, the senior team, and the crew alignment officer in order to provide us guidance and feedback along the way. I'm going to turn things over to Phil to look at some of our findings.
Thanks, Marnie. So as Marnie suggested, there were two key pieces of information that we used from an enrollment perspective to get a clearer perspective on the actual numbers of students that we're talking about. One of those sources was ESIS, our Student Information Management System. This was prior to our transfer over to Power School, and the other source of information was the actual OSR trackers that are used in the schools. So I wanted to take you through 3 charts. These are included in the report to show you the findings from this particular part of the review process. The finding number 1 from the enrollment perspective is that overall there is a net gain of students entering Upper Canada District School Board schools from coterminous schools. And what this chart shows is the net increase of enrollments that have happened over that time period that we examined this by each of our elementary and secondary school panels. And if you look down in the lower right-hand corner of this table, you can see that we found a net increase of 402 students over this time period between the 3 panels. Our elementary school panel actually demonstrated a net loss, if you will, transfer out of 68 students. Our intermediate schools, very good news story, was a net increase of 139, and our secondary schools, even better, 331 for the net increase of 402 that we're showing in this table overall. Also important to note that 78% of the 402 transfers net increase that we saw overall happened over the summer months. In other words, between the end of the 2012 school year and the beginning of 2013. Summary finding number 2 from the enrollment perspective. Coterminous student transfers tend to vary from school to school. This table is intended to show the variations in transfer activity that we found from the work that we did. And you can see from this table that our elementary schools, for example, 33 of those schools out of 64 had a net decrease in enrollment over this time period, as explained by coterminous transfers in and out. 17 of our elementary schools had a net increase, and 14 of the elementary schools had no net change at all. The intermediate schools tell a bit of a different story. 15 of the 18 intermediate schools had a net increase in enrollment over this time period. And the high schools is quite a remarkable story. Of all of our high schools, only 1 showed a net decrease in enrollment. All of the others showed a net increase. And we had a couple of real standouts. BCI, Cornwall Collegiate, Smiths Falls, Thousand Islands, and Van Cleek Hill each had a net increase of more than 20 students. And I should have mentioned on the intermediate side, Thousand Islands Intermediate School had a net increase of 52 students, which I think was a real clear indication of the community support for the introduction of that program at the school. The final thing I'd like to talk about before turning things over to Jeff is this chart, which our finding is school practices vary with respect to OSR tracking. And what we're saying there is the purpose of this table is to give you an indication of the difference in enrollment patterns we found when we looked at the OSR tracker data that's been provided to us in the schools compared to the ESIS data that we looked at. So if you were to look at the bottom right-hand corner again, what that's suggesting is that if we were only to look at the OSR tracker data, we would assume that our actual coterminous net increase in enrollment would be 202 students higher than what we actually found from the ESIS data. But I'd like to point out, really, the ESIS data is the data that we rely on for a very accurate indication of this enrollment change. The OSR tracker is more from the perspective of tracking the movement of those students. So we wanted to ask ourselves, why do we think this change in enrollment from the OSR tracker perspective is showing up? And what we found was that the difference is mostly explained by lower than actual figures for student transfers out. So what we're thinking is that this really is representative of the time lag that we're seeing as our schools update their tracker files after the students leave those schools to go to a coterminous school and vice versa. So over to Jeff.
After we determined the numbers that we were faced with, we really wanted to find out what types of students we were receiving from our coterminous boards and what type of students we were losing. And we used the interview process for that. And one of the real interesting thing was when we brought up, it continued to come up that all meant all. And it was quite evident that everybody believed that. And we determined that we really need to take a look at our mission and our vision statements. And I really wanted to highlight that if you take a look, it says we prepare all students for a successful life and creating futures leading and learning for all. And I think that the huge story through our findings was that throughout our board, to a person, everybody said, all means all. Administrators and staff welcome everybody, welcome all, and continue to meet the needs of all students. And it was interesting, with Van Cleek Hill's presentation earlier, we really saw that they welcomed all with open arms. It really is a celebration that the entire board that embraces all means all. We are providing rigorous care for every student that comes in within our communities, especially the higher needs students, or as we refer to them as Michelangelo students. There's no question that they are some of the obstacles that we are facing. I think that it's difficult when the student walks through the door and there is a lag between receiving all the information from our coterminous boards on that student's OSR. So that's one of the recommendations we do have later on. Some of our conclusions was we do recognize there are geographical issues. Transfers in and out occur, we see quite frequently in urban centers where perhaps the opportunities or options are readily available. But the other thing that we really saw was the staff welcomes every person that walks through the door immediately. Some of the recommendations was we continue to try to identify how we can support these student transfers, these new students that are coming in, and as Van Cleek Hill suggested, unknowns. So we really need to address those students that are coming in from our coterminous boards. I think we have to re-examine the funding piece, because I think we are, initially our study started out by looking at identified students, but it's very difficult to compare the identification of the students because some of the other boards identify students in a different manner. And I think somehow we have to try to improve our communication with the coterminous boards just so we can better serve the students that we are receiving. I know that's difficult, but I think we have to continue with that battle, because the person that would benefit is all the students that are incoming. The OSR tracker was really an interesting piece. It is a ministry requirement. However, we really saw it different from school to school. It was interesting. For example, one of the things that we saw was a grade 8 left without diploma. Well, I don't know if a grade 8 student can get the diploma from high school, but that was one of the issues that we did see. So we'd really like to concentrate on how we make sure that the OSR trackers are consistent across the board. And I think we have to monitor how the student transfers into TR Légers have an impact on the alternative school programming needs. I guess I'll give a pitch for that, but it's difficult because often the TR Leger school as an alternative site has become that for our coterminous board as well. So I think that those are some of the things that we're faced with. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Comments, questions? Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Chair, that's an interesting presentation, and I'm just curious, on your chart, Mr. Dawes, back where you say about the number of students who have left the school early, elementary school, and it says that, what's the number, I'm just trying to flip back here to the numbers, 32? How do the schools account for their leaving? Do they go to the coterminus? Do they leave the counties or area where that school is serving? What's the reason for them leaving?
Through you, Chair. That's data that was extracted from our Student Information Management System, ESIS, and ONSIS reporting. So although it says that the destination of the student leaving was to a coterminous board, it doesn't give the rationale for that move. It simply says that they moved.
Through you, Chair, could I just say that through you, Chair, some of the interviews also came across that. It was the other interesting piece that I found was when we were interviewing the principals, they really knew why those students were leaving, and many of them might have moved out of the area, so they might have went to a coterminous board somewhere else, or a Roman Catholic board. So they were able to answer that question for us.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. Very interesting study and very interesting findings. But, you know, this is a board that values character, always has, always will. We have always put our students first. And I think when we look at some of the obstacles that some of our students face when they come to us, things being late, not getting to us, I think because we have character, because we put our kids first, I think we need to, encourage everyone, both sides, to cooperate, get the best thing that we can for these kids so they can have a good fresh start with us, because we put our kids first. So as much as there are differences of opinion on perhaps how we want things done, I think it's best for us to say, you know what, when these kids come to us, we're going to get the best that we can offer them, and that'll happen because both sides are going to work together.
Trustee McPherson?
Through the chair, I've actually got 3 questions or clarifications.
Sure,
I'll
go
do
ahead.
one and if nobody else jumps in. In your opening statement, there's accepted belief that coterminous board routinely encourages the transfer of its highest need students to Upper Canada District School Board schools, and I know this is something I've heard quite often. Bottom line is, did you find evidence to support it or to refute it?
Through you, Chair. This was a very difficult question to answer. I'll start by saying that when we initially began the charter, we were looking at the highest need students through the lens of students that are identified with a special education need. We did not find evidence that students with special education needs were being routinely transferred. What we did find evidence of when we interviewed our principals, that the students that were coming to us were students that we would classify perhaps as Michelangelo students. They were students that were struggling in their schools. They were students that perhaps did not have that sense of belonging. They could have been dealing with social or emotional issues, family issues, things that make learning very difficult and challenging for them, things that make coming to school, attending regularly, achieving their credits, graduating with their cohort. Those things were present in the students that we're receiving from our coterminous boards. We found evidence of that. I will say that it was very refreshing to hear the perspective of our principal and vice principals. There was nobody bemoaning the fact that we were getting hard to serve students or students with challenges. Everybody was welcoming of those students and very proud of all of the programs that their schools had in place in order to support those students when they walked through the door. So to answer your question more directly, not the special education needs, but certainly students that are hard to serve in our communities and need the programs that we have designed specifically to support those students.
Go ahead, Trustee McPherson.
You got the right slide up there. You identified one elementary school that lost more than 10 students. When you have one school standing out like that, did you dig a little deeper and find out was there something happening in that particular community to have caused that? Like that does seem to be a little bit off the scale.
Director?
Trustee McPherson, through the chair, that was not the mandate of the group.
No.
However, anecdotally, we did take a look when we saw something of that nature. In some of the cases, it was half a class that sort of said we like a program or whatever. We also have discovered in some of those exits of that particular way, there was a particular teacher in a smaller community who enjoys an unbelievable profile, and one or two parents talk, and what you have as an exit that way, because they've got to be over there for this. But overall, there was not a general pattern. But one of the things we discovered in this, that's something we would look for if there was 3 years ago, we saw one that I think we have dealt with very, very well up in the Lanark area, where we lost 32 kids because of a very strong music program at our Coachumers Board. There was a really wonderful music program. And I say to you right now, the interesting thing is we moved through the 7 through 12 model that we have. At that particular school, we have an intermediate teacher that's absolutely to die for, who has basically stopped that exodus as you go through, because the kids were congregated in a setting. One of our trustees knows what school I'm talking about right now. That ended that because the kids were then at a school that perhaps didn't have that quality of that type of music. In the consolidation, they picked up a really solid intermediate music program, and the exodus stopped.
Trustee, do you have another question?
I've got one more.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee McPherson.
It's very refreshing to see the fact that we are experiencing a net increase in students and transfers. It kind of slays that proverbial dragon that we're losing students to the board, to our coterminous boards. I realize it's a little bit off the mark, but despite the increases in our numbers in transfers, it's an acknowledgement that both boards are still facing overall declining enrollment. Is that correct? End of questions.
Trustee Carpenter?
Through you, Chair, this is for Jeff. In the interviews that you made with the principals, did you find out, and I read through it very quickly, I apologize for not spending a whole lot of time on that, but was French immersion in elementary one of the factors where they might have gone to the coterminous board?
It wasn't for me. When we brought the people in, through you, Chair, I apologize. It wasn't through my interviews. When we brought the interview people in, I'm just asking other people, I don't believe it was one of the reasons that was listed.
Thank you.
Trustee McAllister?
I'm looking at the slide for finding one. I note that the number of admissions from the coterminous schools were 777, and the number of transfers out to the coterminous schools from our board was 375, for a net of 402. So we gained 402 students. I find that shocking. I find it shocking because the religious or philosophical differences, as you state, between the Upper Canada District School Board and our coterminous board do not condone the fact that some of their students are in need of alternative means of support, and that our mandates as publicly funded boards are the same under the Education Act. And secondly, I'm proud that we offer a compelling alternative for students whose needs are not met elsewhere. However, this does raise the point, how do we support our schools when this occurs?
Director?
We, first of all, one of the reasons why this task force was created with this charter was, as Trustee McPherson said, there are some rumors for the community. Until you examine it closely and take a real hard look at it, you put the facts out on the table, you continue to deal with perception. Perception challenge becomes reality. The fact is, when the students come across to us, and one of the things we have to do a better job at, and where you're moving us to, and I concur, I agree, is that we are recognizing that we're getting some, maybe not identified kids, but well said by Principal Lindsay, that there are some needs here, and one of the things we have to do more effectively is communicate with our coterminous boards, recognizing that this is not unusual, and Phil will probably tell you this probably occurs almost every year. And we're almost at the point where we can sort of plan that we know we're going to pick up between 200 and 400 kids who are coming to us for a variety of reasons. And one of the main reasons is that our door is wide open, come in. It's also compelling why they come to us too, is that we enjoy in Vankleek-Hill and Glengarry and Charlotte, just for along on the eastern side there, a really strong perception that is real in the community that our kids do very, very well at the next level, which is important. But at the schools, one of the reasons this has come to is that I think we have to talk about that. You saw one of the recommendations. We have to examine the resourcing, because we're getting some needy kids that require more than perhaps, with a traditional quote unquote, if we have such a thing as a regular student. And the next phase of this is, how do we respond accurately to resourcing our schools effectively to meet these needs? And there were some recommendations in there, and if with the permission of the chair, I know that perhaps the principals would like to respond. You have looked at the stuff very closely, Phil, and Jeff and Marnie. What I hear John say, if it's accurately, what is the impact on the school principal, the teachers, when you pick up 15 or 20 kids who demand perhaps a high level of resourcing? Is that fair? Trustee McAllister?
Yes, that's fair.
Through you, Chair. I guess the overwhelming answer was the all means all throughout our schools, and it was quite exciting to see every person say that to us. And I think the issue is, no question, at the beginning of the semesters and the beginning of the year, offices are busy and things like that, but it also ties into service excellence. And as soon as that person walks through the door, it was interesting that they were part of our board. And in fact, we've often heard of some office assistants going out and actively recruiting within the communities, and teachers and things like that. So I think that there's no question it's difficult. There are barriers that we have to perhaps adjust some of the resources that we already have to meet the needs of these students we're receiving. But I think that because of the all means all attitude that's evident throughout the board, I think people are willing to go that extra mile to make sure they're welcoming. So I think that there are challenges. However, I think that we are just rolling up our sleeves and getting it done.
Thank you.
Add, if I can, through you, Chair. I think that what our data shows us also is that a lot of our students that are coming across intermediate and secondary. And with our move to 7 to 12 schools, a lot of our Upper Canada students, when they're transitioned from grade 6 to grade 7, by the time they're moving from grade 8 to grade 9, they're through our Link Crew program and our web program, those kids already have that sense of belonging. They're part of that school community. So that 7 to 12 structure has been really great in providing that stability for the students that we already have. When kids are coming across in grade 9, there's fewer students that the school is already trying to build that community with and build that sense of belonging. So the 7 to 12 structure, I think, certainly has afforded the secondary schools a little bit of breathing room there. I'd also say that not every student that is coming across has needs. It could be that they have some friends, or they want to try something new, or they didn't like their teacher. It's not every student that comes across to us, but there certainly are a number that require the programs that we have. And we're celebrating within our communities the great things that we're offering. We're celebrating All Means All. We're celebrating a Link crew. Through our social media, we're putting out there how great our schools are. So I think it's only expected that we are going to be attracting more and more students that are looking for what Upper Canada has to offer.
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. I don't doubt for a moment that people embrace and support All Means All. Our board, and I've said this before, our board is the only board within our jurisdiction that can receive all students. We have no language criteria, we have no religious criteria. So whether those families and those students choose to go to an alternative board from kindergarten, at some point they make the conscious decision to come to Upper Canada. We support them, we do that. I think what we need to do as well is make sure that we put an honest effort into to make that decision easier when they send their students or their children to kindergarten. So we don't have those situations of transferring between boards at some point. I want to focus on your recommendations though, if I can for a second. We've got 5 recommendations. The recommendations are the what's. When do we get to the how? And I want to look at a couple of the ones individually. The first one is re-examine how we resource our schools to support student transfers. So that's the what. How do we do that? When do we do that?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I guess we really haven't looked to the hows. It's more of the recommendations. Trustee McDonald, I would say that that's our findings. I would hope that we would take these recommendations and find a way to do the how.
Go ahead.
So,
Can I add something? Sorry. I think that just to add to Jeff, we did see through our data collection some really stellar examples of best practices. We have some schools that are doing a phenomenal job with their OSR tracking. So we have a model that that school, for example, is using to track the OSRs coming in and out. So if we want to look at a process by which to improve that, we have some schools that are doing that really well already. In terms of communication with the coterminous boards to better serve our students, we have some schools and districts that are doing that within our district that are doing that amazingly well. Down in the Seaway area, Terry Gardner, it came out in his interview just as clear as day. The processes they have in place, the way they communicate, the way they support their students, it's a stellar example of how we can work together to support students. So we do have some really good examples through our data in terms of a place to start as we move forward.
Go ahead.
So on the second recommendation, you have request the Ministry of Education to re-examine how funding can support public boards that serve a higher need clientele than their coterminous boards. So I guess based on your research and based on your feedback, we don't get enough funding to deal with all of our clientele, or we don't get enough funding to deal with the clientele who might come midstream.
Director?
Through you, Chair, we would ask if the trustees to direct me to do that, to examine parts of the formula that perhaps are potentially outdated. And what we're talking about is some of the formulas are geographically distance related. For example, some of our boards across Ontario, because they have large geographies and large distance to travel, you have transportation issues that were established long before we had web-based design, long before we had the ability to use the wizard style stuff to have conversations instead of flying a person into a place or whatever. And what we have is some formulas that really reflect a different time. One of the difficulties with that is I think if we open that up, but we have a fairly generous, because of what we did 10 years ago with special education. And this one here is perhaps to look at the, if you have a higher proportion of special needs kids as designed, maybe you should get some more dollars. But I think we're going to have to examine that closely. As Principal Tarasic said, these are the recommendations. We're going to have to take a real close look at them if the trustees so determine, and then to come back and say, here's what we think it should look like to answer your question. Here's what the change is, or this is what we should do to honor those recommendations where they've come from. but one may very in fact be an examination of parts of the formula and how revenues are generated and shared with the boards of education.
Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
Well, and I think looking at the formula is good, but I guess where I was trying to head is, I think the thing that impacts us the most, and I'm making an assumption here, is that when a student comes to us after our magic time of counting, head counts within our school. So if we get a transfer for a student between, after September 30th, let's say, or after October 10th, whatever the count is, or we get a student that transfers in secondary, the end of February, early March, that kind of thing, that impacts us more dramatically than a student that might start with us in September. Is that correct?
For you, Chair, I think you raise a very interesting and valid point. We did hear from our TR Leger folks, and we need to do a little more digging on this to get the numbers, but we did hear some anecdotal evidence to suggest that there are students that arrive at TR Leger in particular after the March 31st recording date and don't necessarily show up on the October 31st reporting date the school year following. So in essence, there could be situations, as you've suggested, where students are attending UCDSB schools, but we don't receive the requisite funding to support those students. And that's something that we would need to look into a little more detail.
Go ahead.
I'm content with the recommendations. What I'd like to see, though, from the recommendations is the action moving forward on the hows. So I asked the director, is this something, will some of these be framed in a further charter, or will some of these be framed by us asking for those hows?
Combination of both. As you know how the charters are organized, sometimes they're organized by this very charter here was organized by myself to get at that lingering question you just talked about, is that what time do the kids come in, what resources and allocations, and to finally deal with some of the myths, as Trustee McPherson talked about there, that somehow declining enrollment means we're losing students, and as Trustee McPherson said, we're losing students both the boards. Because where we're coming back is if as the trustees receive this, there's some things that we're going to do because we have to do them as educators, and there may be some priority created by you directing us to move faster on something. So it could be a charter and a specific thing. For example, I believe one of the issues is that the community is a community, and the child's a child of that community. And if they're coming across to us, I think we should do everything. Each board, if we have one in the primary level going across to our co-chairman's board, we should do everything we can to ensure that they have a successful entry there, and not dragging our feet, but do the right thing. And I think the same sort of level of cooperation and quality communication when students come our way to say, how can we make sure that they do well when they land at CCBS or RO or Rideau? And those are the things that we're going to begin to say. So two, combination one, maybe a directed charter from here tonight, or you may come back and want to report on this about what our actions will be and potentially what the charter would be as well.
Go ahead.
And I would be open to that. I would allow you to have the report come back to say how you were going to address those.
I'll come to you. Trustee McMullen? Trustee McRae?
Through you, Chair, I think my question has kind of been answered, and I think that Trustee McAllister alluded to it, and so has the Director of Education. And that had to do with when students transfer from one school to another school, how quickly does the envelope of financial resources, how long does that take to when our board actually receives those funds and then is in a position to utilize them into resources for our schools? And I don't have the answer to that question.
Director?
It's time sensitive. For example, if we understand the students coming in August, and we can put all our pieces together, the OSR arrives, we can begin a whole process, then that would, as Trustee McDonald alluded to, there are some magical dates in the formulas and how it's driven. The October 31st number, and I believe it's the March 1st, March 31st number. Those are dates when our head count is really down, examined, and all of our special education kids are identified as you go through. Those are critical ones. So it is time sensitive of where it's going to go, and I think what we have to do is really, those are dates that we pay close attention to. I don't believe it's a system number. I don't think a principal sits her in her office and says, well, here's the magical date, I'll keep them. I think what happens is much of this is related to the performance of a student. As Principal Lindsay said so well, it's got to do with individual circumstances, and sometimes we do see a pattern, for example, that Trustee McPherson raised, but that's a pattern that usually is an August pattern. We don't see 10 kids leaving from a school all at once at Christmas type of thing to another elementary school, but you will over the course of time. So it's time sensitive, and I think what we have to do as we move to the next stage of looking at action plans to support this and creating a charter potentially to do that is to examine that question.
Trustee McRae?
And through you, Chair, in terms of transitioning students, will we in this additional report that we receive be given an understanding of ways and means that we're going to attempt to improve those transitions so that, in fact, we're offering the most effective and inclusive situation that we can possibly allow our students to have.
I think that will be a major portion of this, and I think that what we would like to do is to really understand the communication component that is critical. The other one is it's timely in how we do it, and I think what we have to do is probably put a procedure in here that's very strict in how, when we receive stuff, how quickly we want all the information, gauge our parents in conversations about their students, gauge the student in conversations about their entry. I think we're doing a much better job of our transitions of 6s all to our new 7 through 12 programs, and there's all kinds of things going on to ensure the cohort moves along well. This part really is, as Principal Lindsay said, is often very, very uniquely individual and precise. And I think we have to really figure out, I think we do it well at some places, as Principal Lindsay said, and she may want to comment. I think we have some really excellent practice that is very, very inclusionary and very open and builds capacity not only in our system but our coterminous system and also in our community. And I think what we are hearing from our leadership here is that every child deserves the very, very best from us, our coterminous board, and from our community.
Trustee Swan?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just have a question. We're talking about high needs children entering our board, but one complaint I've had in the last couple of years is that we weren't doing exit interviews in regards to why our students are leaving to coterminous boards, and are we doing anything about that?
Director?
In fact, that's Trustee Swan, that's really the beginning of this particular exercise. The first part was a perception around many communities that we had students leaving to our coterminous board, and in fact that was quite the opposite, as you can see from this report, and Phil Dawes can share with you that this is not extraordinary, the data that that the group has shared with you. The idea of the exit surveys and so forth that's also come through the framework committee, I think is something we really have to examine, not only for the exit of students to other boards of education, but I think we have to examine the exit of our grade 12 students to college, workplaces, and universities to see, did we do our job in preparing? So Trustee Swan, you're quite accurate. I think we have to be more precise and to start to ask some questions and to use the surveys to inform us so that we can be even more sensitive to the groups we're serving.
Thank you.
Trustee Kirkner?
I'll pass.
Trustee McAllister?
Thank you, Chair. I think the recommendations are extremely important, and I think that they're important enough to warrant a motion on the books. And I would like to make the following motion pursuant to a lot of what Trustee McDonald said. Be it resolved that the Director provide at a future meeting, and I would suggest perhaps March or April, a plan to implement the 5 recommendations of this charter report.
So, just so I make sure that what you're asking for is for them to develop the how, and then develop a plan to implement the how? Does that give you enough time to do 2 months to
First
do
of all,
the how?
no. First of all, I think that would be very ambitious, Trustee McAllister through the chair. These guys have worked real hard. These have come to the strategic table, but I've held them back in going to sort of let's get at the plans so that it's very coherent, and also is the fact that it's over our entire system. And so I don't think I've worn this group out. I don't think they're putting their hands up saying they'd like to be the implementation team of the plan. But I think we probably need about to May 1st. Really would.
That's just to develop the how, or to develop the how and the implementation plan?
And I think both. That's why, because I think that's something we'd be looking for to give direction to our schools for September.
Are you seconding?
No,
I was gonna second it.
You're gonna second it? Okay, well, let's get it seconded. Do you have the motion? Yep, and the committee of the whole recommend the Upper District School Board direct the director to provide,
Specific date.
at a May board meeting, we'll say, a plan to implement the 5 recommendations within this report. Okay? All right, so to the motion. That's what I'm looking for right now. Let's deal with the motion. Trustee Garrow?
I just have a question. This seems to me base data, and like doing this whole exercise, you've got a trend, or base data, I should say, and do an analysis of this at the moment, takes time. And I have to agree with the director through your chair that it takes a little bit more time to be able to provide something, not only the how, but also an implementation plan. God, that's very onerous, but I think it's a good news story.
I do too.
And I think going back to communication is very important, not only with the coterminous boards, but also your family of schools. This should be, as a good news story, out there, and stating that there are reasons why. I go back to what, I guess the trigger from Trustee Swan, the exit interviews. We do entry interviews, but exit interviews are also very important too. So I just throw that as a caution.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? Trustee McDonald?
I support the motion. I'm concerned that the plan itself may not be realistic for May. And I'm more interested in the how at this point, and the how in order to build the budget process. If you believe that the plan can be implemented at that point, I think there's some things though that.
Just, may I,
Go
point
ahead.
of clarification. What I'd like to bring back is the plan, not the implementation. I think by May 1st, the senior table and a group of professionals can really examine this and say, these are things we should start to do. The implementation plan, I think you're quite correct. I think that's going to take communications. This is ambitious, but I see this being a major component of our leadership days in August, that we would put our communications plan together, because this is a good news story, but the tough news in this one is that we've got to do a better job, more effective job of communicating. As Principal Lindsay said, this isn't sort of like sending out a mass, email with a memo saying everyone do this. Many of these things are one-on-one situations with families where they're coming across, and sometimes as Principal Tarasic said, they're very needy situations. And I think what we're going to look at here is it's going to be, as Jeff has said, some of it's going to be service related and recognizing levels of service. Some of it's going to be the protocols of really how quickly can we turn OSRs back and forth as you go through, and some will have implications for office administrators, procedures in schools. And so what I'm saying to you, yes, May 30th, I think we could have a rigorous conversation and say this is what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to roll this out until August.
Okay. But I still think that that's compliant with what you've asked for, because you're just really saying that you're going to say, you're going to come back in May and say, this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
In May. You won't have it done in May. You aren't going to have it implemented, but that's not what the.
I just need a clarification, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, trustee McPherson?
Through the chair, not a question. Not to simplify a very comprehensive report, what we've identified here tonight is what? What we're asking for, if I'm reading it rightly, is the how. And at that point, we move on to the when. Am I interpreting this correctly?
The motion as it stands right now is asking for them to come up with the how and a plan to implement the how. That's what we've asked for. Plan might take 2 years, who knows? But and so you're comfortable doing the how and a plan to implement the how by
Well, we've been
the end
talking
of
about
May.
this for a long time, so
Okay. All right, any other comments or questions with regards to the motion? Then we're gonna proceed with the question. I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Oh, here we go. No one was asking. Okay, trustee Karkner
Yes, I'm just
and trustee McAllister's in favor, so all right, good. All right, that passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much for your report. Good work, team. Phil, don't go far. Okay, the next item. Did you get the motion that we need to put it back on the table? You want to pass me the? All right, I'll make it up then. Okay, I need a motion to resume the item from the previous board meeting. Just a matter of order here. I think that it should have been the first item. Anyway, just for future. Whenever we table something, should have been. I didn't catch it either. Pardon me? It isn't. It should be the first item. No, this would have to take precedence. Anyway. Okay. Doesn't matter. I need a motion to resume the item. So, trustee Richards, trustee McRae. So we're gonna vote, or? That's good. Richardson, McRae. Okay. Okay, that's enough to pass. Okay. All right. So, trustees, just to refresh our memory, we had an item dealing with financial report we received at the beginning of January. The second meeting in January, we received a more detailed update consisting of two chief components, one of which was a financial review, and the second of which was a report on the enrollment. And so that's where I'm going to pick up, is on the enrollment piece. And invite Mr. Dawes to the floor. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, trustees, for providing me this opportunity to talk in a bit more detail about our system projections and their role with the budgetary planning process through the Finance Department. In planning and research, we do projections all the time. We do all sorts of different projections. We're continually receiving information in, most specifically updated enrollment data that allows us to continually update a variety of projections. We do projections for accommodation planning, we do projections for staffing purposes, for accommodation reviews, facility planning. Tonight is about talking about the projections we do that we call system projections, treating the board like one big school. And it's important that we do system projections because it gives us a view as to where the board is going longer term with respect to enrollment trends. And of course, it's also a key source of information for effective budgetary planning. So what I want to do tonight is take you through 10 informational slides. The first slide that I want to take you through will show the overall population trends that are driving the enrollment patterns that we continue to see across our board. Then I want to take you through 5 slides that will give you an indication of how our system enrollment projections have compared to actual enrollments over time. Then I want to show you the connection between our system enrollments and the actual school-by-school enrollments that we have seen this year. And then I want to wrap things up by showing you 2 slides that will demonstrate why we had a lower than expected secondary system enrollment this year. So let me start with this slide. What you're looking at here is not enrollment. This is population. And we've taken total preschool and school-aged population and we're showing you historically over 4 key points of time, 1999, 2003, 2008, and 2013, where this population is trending. And you can see in the 0 to 3 preschool age population that since 2003 we've had, for all intents and purposes, a real stabilization in that particular age group of population. Again, this is population that's resident to the Upper Canada District School Board area. The age 4 to 13 elementary school age population, you'll notice, was in decline from 1999 to 2003 and has more or less stabilized since 2008. And then you look at the age 14 to 17 secondary age population, and you'll see that between 1999 and 2003, it actually increased. And then it took a decrease from 2003 to 2008, and then it took a decidedly higher, I should say lower, amount of decrease from 2008 to 2013 down to 16,581. It's important that you understand the context of this information because this speaks directly to the trend that we've been talking about in Upper Canada now for about 10 years. And that's that concept of the children of the baby boom, the echo boom that's moving its way through our system. So the last year of the baby boom, for all intents and purposes, was about 1960. And those people, that huge increase in population, had children, and they were called the echo boom. And that echo boom of students, for a while, in most boards across Ontario, saw an increase in enrollment, and then it saw a decrease in enrollment as they worked their way through. So we've now seen that elementary cohort of student work its way through the elementary panel, and it's now about halfway through its secondary years. So that's why our elementary enrollments, for all intents and purposes, have stabilized as a system. Our secondary enrollments are declining, and we have about 3 or 4 more years left of secondary school enrollment decline. So what I wanted to do then was take a look at when we first started talking about enrollment decline about 10 years ago. We wanted to talk about our system enrollments to give the board and folks right across the system an indication of things to come. And I went back to 2003 when we first started developing system enrollment projections to show this enrollment decline. And that's what this graph shows. It shows in blue the projections that were developed back in 2003 when we first started talking about this, and in red are actual enrollments. And what you're looking at here is actual elementary system head count, okay, over that time period. And the general conclusion here is that we've essentially followed the trend that we originally thought we were going to see back in 2003 when we first started talking about this. On the secondary side, somewhat of a similar picture. We generally see our secondary enrollments, and again, this is head count, following the trend that we originally started talking about back in 2003, with the slight exception of the last 2 years. And you can see that our decline now for this year was starting to trend a little bit lower than what we were originally projecting back in 2003. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So then I thought what I'd like to show you is what we're calling our system projection variations. And what this is showing is it's a comparison of, and this is ADE by the way, average daily enrollment, showing the differential between our ADE projection on the system, elementary in this case, compared to what we actually received elementary specific to each year. So every year we develop and update a system enrollment projection that we provide to the finance department to prepare our budgetary planning. That's what you're looking at here. And there's a few conclusions we can make from this one. Number one, you can see that sometimes our actual enrollments exceed our projected enrollments, and sometimes our actuals are lower than our projected enrollments. And this year, our elementary actual ADE is actually higher by about 82 than what we were projecting back in the spring in preparation for this school year. Oh, one more point. You can see on this graph as well how our elementary enrollments have more or less stabilized. Still a bit of a dip this year, but for all intents and purposes, pretty much stabilized now compared to where they were just a few years ago. This is the secondary picture. Again, ADE, comparing annually what we projected and what we actually received. And again, you can see a general trend that sometimes we're higher, sometimes we're lower. This year, we actually over-projected our enrollment by 208 ADE based on current figures. But the also important thing to see on this graph is where we are right now in secondary enrollment decline. We're right in the middle of this downward slope, and you can see the dramatic change in direction that has been taking place on secondary enrollments over the past 5 or 6 years. This is just another way of looking at it. We just took the enrollment variation and put it on a scatter plot. And what this shows is that by the trend line, generally speaking, over time, we've fallen within a differential range of about 180 ADE based on that trend line over the last 5 or 6 year period. So what I want to take you through now is what does this all mean as it relates to school by school enrollments? And you'll see in your package we've provided you with a report that we update regularly in the Planning and Research Department. We call it our ADE update report. And what it gives you is the FTE, the full-time equivalent projection for October and March that we projected. I'm on the left-hand side. I'm just showing you here the format of this particular chart, and then I'll take you to some actual numbers. So the October FTE, the March FTE for, in this case for 2013-2014, gives us the projected ADE because it's the average of those two FTE figures. And then to the right of that, we've got the JK to grade 8 and Spec Ed headcount that we actually received. And then to the right of that, you can see we've got our October FTE actual. And from that actual, we're able to update the March projected FTE number to give us an updated ADE number for this year. So we use this report a lot to keep track of where our enrollments are. And for this year, of course, ADE is still a projected figure because we haven't received the March numbers yet. But generally speaking, our October to March enrollment differentials are comparatively easy to project. It's that October, it's the March to October or October to October numbers that have to take in more demographic realities. So what I wanted to show you here was, this is a breakdown from your report of each family of schools, and from the elementary perspective, what those updated ADE numbers look like. And what I wanted to point out with the blue arrow at the bottom is there's the 82.57 ADE that I referenced earlier. So when you add up all of our current enrollments on the elementary panel, that 82.57 represents the higher than expected enrollments that we actually received in comparison to our original ADE projections last spring. But on the secondary side, you can see there's the 208 difference. By the way, I'm sorry, there's a typo in there. I've got elementary system update. That should be secondary. My apologies. So you can see there's the 208 that I referenced earlier, differential on our secondary side. But what's really important here to note is that of that total 208 differential, 111 ADE of that total was specific to TR Leger School. And the reason for that is because we're continuing to improve our ability to collect accurate data on TR Leger students. The truth of the matter is, it's a more mobile type of student in those schools, and we have had challenges in previous years in, as accurately as possible, maintaining an accurate FTE figure for those students. And so what happened this year was, with our improvement in collecting this information, we actually found a lower FTE for TR Leger than we were actually projecting last spring. So that accounted for 111 of the total 208 differential on the secondary side. The other key piece I wanted to bring to your attention is specific to grade 12. And what I wanted to show you here was how we would have made our projection for grade 12 based on data that's available to us. And what I'm showing you here is the historical retention that's happened from grade 11 to 12 over the past 4-year period. And this is a head count figure. But you can see for the last 4 years, we've seen a very stable grade 11 to 12 retention rate of about 1.23. It's been quite consistent. 1.2694 in 2009, 1.268, 1.232, 1.2625. So in other words, we're looking at those grade 11 students and we're trying to understand what would we expect in the number of grade 12. And the reason it's higher than 1 is because it accounts for a 2-year period, year 4 and year 5 students. So we knew this year that there was something coming up called the 34 credit threshold, but we weren't entirely clear on what we could expect, if any, in the way of enrollment change as a result of that 34 credit information that was coming out of the Ministry of Education. And the reality is, as you can see, that our actual retention on those grade 11 to 12 students came in at 1.2106, which is, I think, a difficult thing for us to predict in hindsight. Hindsight's 2020, but certainly what we're seeing is more than we expected students choosing not to return for their 5th year of school this year. So I want to conclude this by making a couple of points. And the sailors in the room will, I hope, forgive me for this analogy. And I'm looking right at Jeremy. But I was thinking the other day that, you know, doing this type of work is somewhat like sailing a boat, where you've got a direction in mind, right? I'm looking for support here, Jeremy. But, you know, there are tacks along the way. And there are situations along that journey that you need to respond to. Wind conditions, right? Weather conditions, you name it. So, you know, a system enrollment projection is meant to guide what we're talking about in terms of budgetary and other types of planning, long-term planning. I can think you can see overall, it's helped our board a lot to be talking about enrollment decline, to be talking about long-term trends, and to understand the demographic realities of this region that we're living through. But I think there's an even more important point to make here, and that's that I think this board has done remarkably well in its budgetary and other planning in the light of very, very serious and significant demographic challenges. It's not easy to simply develop an enrollment projection and then have that implemented in our schools. This is incredible change that we're seeing. And when we do a system projection, we then have to somehow implement those numbers. And so we're asking our schools to take on significant change, and we've done it very well. I'm so proud of our school principals, because when we connect with them and we're asking them for input on the enrollment projections that we're trying to develop for them, that we know have to aggregate up to the system totals that we're looking for, we need their help. We need their buy-in. We need their information. And I've never worked with a better group of principals than at the Upper Canada Board to give us information back. But I also have to respect the realities that they're living through. And so we take our system enrollment projection process very seriously because we want to come up with the best number possible. Because if we go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction, we cause unbalances to the system that we have to correct. We know that. But I would say again, you know, hindsight is 20/20. I think the ultimate lesson to be learned in all of this is that we need flexibility in our budgetary planning that accounts for some level of variance on our system projection numbers. We'll always do our best in planning and research to find that best number. Every year I think we're looking for new information to make the process better. But all in all, I think this board has a lot to be proud of in its ability to continually pass balanced budgets in light of this significant demographic change that's happening right across our region. So thank you for that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Trustees? Trustee McAllister?
On Appendix B, the total, I'm looking at the TR Leger figures. They accounted for the negative variance of 111 versus 208 for the total. How does that compare to other years?
I'm sorry, to our
Other years?
To other years, how does that compare to other years?
Through you, Chair, the point I'm trying to make is we rely very much on historical data to develop a projection. So let me use a case in point. If every year we saw a total enrollment for TR Leger that was 750, we'd project 750. If every year we saw a trend that said there was a decline by 50 students every year, we'd probably project a decline in 50 students. What we're seeing now, though, is that it's not so much a reflection of an actual trend in enrollment, but the reflection of a difference that's happening in the way that we're recording those particular students. So the number of students that we're actually receiving for TR Leger is lower than we expected because we've actually improved our reporting mechanisms for that harder to track student in that particular school.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. Just to pick up on that point, we may be recording it, but can you speak to the legislation change that was implemented, and perhaps maybe not you or the director, the legislation change that was implemented about the change in the sense that you had to attend the classes as opposed to the days?
Go ahead, Director.
In fact, it's good to have Principal Trasick there. You may want to join us at the microphone to deal with the tough questions. Trustee McDonald, we have had reporting procedure changes for us, and they are causing for a higher level of precision. As earlier stated by Phil, is that this is a very fluid group. And often they're kids who may be in fact registered in September at 3 different schools. They are registered in one of our schools, they're registered in a public or a French or Catholic school, and then they hold off their bet by holding on to TR Leger spot. And that causes a very fluid situation. And with the new reporting procedures, it does not give us real flexibility. And so a student may come in for the first 3 days, we count them on our register, and then we have rules that say after so many days we have to take them off, and then they reappear, as you know, by the nature of some of the kids. This is the discipline we're going to have to get to. And you're right, we have new reporting procedures and PSAP reporting procedures that were not necessarily designed for a fluid type of program like this as you go through. And I think we're going to have to figure out how to bring rigor to a group that proven that rigor doesn't sometimes work for them. Trustee McDonald, through the chair, Jeff, have I accurately captured that?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I would say the biggest difference is now the 15 consecutive periods. If they miss a consecutive period, then they are withdrawn from that period. At TR Leger, it's not uncommon to see a student register 3-4 times in a semester. They will come in, register, work, go to school for the week, and then not show up for the next 15 days. And then, of course, they have to be taken off our register. So with the count dates of October 31st and March 31st, it's very difficult. They have to be there the whole 30 days. And with the group that we're serving, remember that it's the under 21s, not just the under 18s. It's like we track it monthly, and I would say the month before, beginning of October, I think we had 960 in our books, and at the end of November, it was like a bit higher, but that's regardless of the count date. I think it's really the transit population that we're dealing with. Many of our community partners, for example, if they're on Ontario Works, the students have to be attending school regularly. So we're trying to work better with them to make sure that they are within those count dates and things like that.
Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
So you talked about one of the issues about a student attending the school and then not coming for 15 days. Do you have the situation where you have a student attending school every day, but maybe not a particular class every day? So then all of a sudden they don't become full-time, they're now classified as part-time.
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we do, and that's one of the things that we did try to institute this year. That we went to a rotating schedule similar to what mainstream schools have, and we're hopeful that we'll have an impact. But you're quite correct. Often the population that we serve might not get there till 9 o'clock or 9:30. They might have missed first period. They don't go back after lunch, and that makes them part-time because they're only attended 2 out of the 4 periods. So that would mean that they're not on a full-time status.
Just one final.
Go ahead.
Just one final point. I want to talk to the process, not necessarily around TRLAJ, so you're off the hook, Mr. Trazik. The process that we have, so you look at projections, it's forecasting. And the only way to get better is to get a better crystal ball. And I don't know that that's ever going to happen, right? I mean, we are forecasting what we think may occur. If we're really good at it, you wouldn't be in this position. You'd be sitting on the stock market somewhere and trying to forecast futures for a lot of different things. So I think we've done a fairly good job, and your department has done a fairly good job of what we're doing. I think you hit a point about how we handle it moving forward in the budget process. Because if we always know that we have a variance potentially around that 100, you can do lots of different things, right? You can put a standard deviation in to say this is what we're going to, how to deal with it. The reality is that we need to make sure that we handle it through the budget process. So from a forecasting standpoint, when we look at a margin of 100 students compared to what's our overall enrollment,
24,000.
pretty darn good.
Yeah.
We're in a situation this year that for some reason or other it's heightened, right? We had a couple of other things that have occurred that have caused us to be in this situation. So we've learned from our mistake from passing a budget in a very tight, thin margin of error opportunity to making sure that we move forward. We have a process built in based on your comment about allowing for that variance of potentially 100 students. I saw your lines. There's not very many gaps between those lines. And where they are, it's very thin. So I think the process, and as you said, you continue to monitor it and continue to look at how we can get better. I trust that that will still occur. I think it's up to us now to make sure that we take that information and build it into our process come June, that we allow ourselves to have that. Sometimes it's going to be to the good, sometimes it's going to be to the bad. There are other things that we can do as well to help eliminate the offset from students leaving. So the work that we do to keep students in our buildings and the work that we do to encourage students to come in. So I'm not accepting the fact that we always will see students leave and we'll be down. I think there's a lot of work that we can do to make sure that students come to us and students stay with us. So I think, I don't know that we can get any better.
Thanks, Trustee McDonald. Mr. Dawes, Trustee McDonald has mentioned the term of 100. What would be your suggestion as what we should factor in as an acceptable variance for budgeting? What number would you assign to it? I mean, you look at it, I mean, 100 seems reasonable when you look at the Appendix B variance chart. But would that be your suggestion, or?
Through you, Chair, I'm a little hesitant on this one, but I do think that this year was an exceptional year. We had a couple of situations that, again, in hindsight, I think it would have been difficult to predict. If you want to use the overtime scatter plot methodology, I think that's reasonable. More or less within 100 should be close. But again, I'll always stand to the possibility that we might extend for a variety of reasons that threshold.
Trustee McPherson?
Through the chair. Even Angus Reid says accurate within 3%. A question about the TR Leger enrollment versus the secondary enrollment. There's a certain degree of that population is transitionary between the systems. They move back and forth as they need supports and at different levels. Do we have a means of tracking the movement of those students between the two systems in that we don't lose track of them in transition, so to speak? Like, is it all under the one record system that they're always accounted for?
Through you, Chair, it's a good point, and I think it connects very nicely with the previous presentation. And I think you'll see some improvements in that respect based on the recommendations that you just passed as they relate to the E47 charter.
Trustee Garrow?
No, it's good.
Oh, sorry. Any other comments or questions? Okay, go ahead, Trustee McAllister.
I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but does this mean that we are going to be projecting a balanced budget? At least that would be our goal.
You're making a jump there, I think. Right? What do you jump? Like, how are you? I'm interested to
Well,
know.
we're looking at a variance here, right? And the variance that we have in our budget right now to account for that is that non-compliant feature, right?
But I think that we're calculating this year's problem, so I don't think we're going to get any benefit from a new variance.
No. No. We'll deal with that, I guess, later.
You're looking at a balanced budget?
We're looking at a compliant and balanced budget. That's
Okay, compliant or balanced?
a balanced and compliant budget.
Okay. Not sure that's good news. How in the $3 million bucks? That's a lot. I'm not sure that's good news.
Taking out the trustees' salaries.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll get you 50 cents.
We're counting on that 50 cents.
Okay. I think that coming out of this trustees, I think there's a couple of things that we need to look at. And one of them is TR Leger, I think needs to be looked at. I think we need to look at it so that we can come up with a better predictive model in terms of its funding. I think that we have to recognize that the students move. We have how many campuses?
9.
Somebody can shout it out. 17 campuses. So you know that, and you've got to keep them open. Once you've said you're going to keep them open, there are some areas, and so you have fluctuating student populations, but you still have to keep the building open. To me, we need to establish sort of some thinking on A, how to make sure that we understand how many students we have. B, we need to come up with sort of an expectation of what kind of cost it's going to be to the board to operate a useful program. This program, I was at the SD&G Poverty Summit, and without educators mentioning it, people were mentioning, TR Leger kept coming up. Now, it's always interesting how they don't recognize that that's UCDSB, but nonetheless, TR Leger kept coming up as this is an important component in us ensuring that every person has the opportunity to get out of poverty if education is part of the issue. So we have that moral obligation, but I don't know that we've ever really come to terms with the cost and what it would take for us to deliver that in continue to deliver it in the world class, because we're noted around the world for this program, to continue to deliver it under the knowledge that budgets are going to get tighter and that we need to become very efficient at how we plan for certain budget items. This one cannot continue to put us at risk. We need to have a better sense of how to handle it. So Trustees, I think we need work done on it. I think it needs to be done by a third party to give a good hard look at it. So I don't know what director you want to speak to it, but I think this is something as a board we should consider.
Chair, to our trustees and the senior team, this is a gem in the Upper Canada Crown. There's no doubt about it. And I regret the fact that up in Lanark the other day, again, they did not understand it's our program. They thought Leger was some sort of center of its own. And maybe Jeff Jurassic sending some news out there that he's building a kingdom or whatever. But the fact is, I think you're absolutely right, is that Trustee McDonald has hit it on the head. We have new accounting procedures that are quite defined, and what we have is an operation that has operated for a long time and has been loose on that particular end because of the nature of the clients we serve. The idea of examining this, because it's going to get tight, I think is a great idea. The third party is a great idea because this board has never, ever looked away from a hard look at ourselves in the mirror, warts and all, and I think we have to do that. I think we're very proud. Some 8 or I guess 9 years ago, Ian led a comprehensive review of our special education programs, and without doubt, it's one of the best special education deliveries in the province. We had Dr. Jean Hewitt on that program, Ian, and we had Jerry Clark. And then we came back again, I believe, 18 months later, and I believe we followed 3 years later with another comprehensive review. Are we hitting our marks? We've had our character review, third party, but other things we've done. On this one, if I'm directed through a motion, which I think you're moving towards, for a comprehensive review with recommendations to move forward, I would think that would make all of us better. I think it would also help to promote the fact that even in Cornwall, where the TR Leger is still alive, I'm not sure if they always remember it's Upper Canada too, and I think we have to do some things with it. So I would entertain that's doable, and more than doable, I think it's something that would make us better.
Trustee McPherson?
I think in this process, and I was there and we did spec ed, is we have to keep a positive note on it. When we examine our spec ed program, we had a good program, but we made it better through that review process. I'm very supportive of TR Leger. We've got a great program, but if we go through this process, we've got a real good chance of making it even better. And at the same time, addressing some of the board's needs, because we all know sitting around this table that things are going to start getting tight financially. So, I support that.
So are you moving the motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, it's not the enrollment process. We want to examine the whole program delivery. Okay. Of TR Leger. All right, so I have it moved and seconded by Trustee McMillan. Any comments or questions on the motion itself? Trustee Karpner.
I'm in agreement with this study, as long as we are going to look at a third party coming in to do it. And in Prescott Russell, we've just opened 3 new sites. We had a partnership with our coterminous board, and we've gotten out of that agreement and opened our own facilities in Prescott Russell. So it'll be interesting to see how that change has worked. And I'm sure it's worked positively. I've been to 2 of the 3 new sites, and I'm quite impressed with the staff and the facility and what's going on there. So I'm in favor of it.
Through you, Chair?
Yep.
I'd just like to see if we could include in the motion something about student tracking. So let's say they're finishing off 10 days at TR Leger, and then they go back to a regular high school, that's included in this procedure, so we don't lose the enrollment count.
That would be a natural part of it.
Director, you just want to...
That will be a natural part of this, and I think it's important that we examine that procedure as we talked about in the earlier presentation about actually tracking where the students are and potentially going beyond the student record tracking to perhaps, and we can do that. I think that we have the technology to do that, and Power School has great capacity for that, I think, doesn't it, Jeremy?
Okay, Okay, the committee of the whole recommend the Upper Canada District School Board request that direct the director to review examine Okay. All right, so that'll go to board next meeting.
At the risk of being presumptuous, I think the trustees deserve to know that tonight, because Trustee McAllister probably waiting to say what timeline would we need. And I think that's a very fair question, but I'd like to engage our associate director and Ian, you have good professional judgment on this one. How much time do you think our special ed was about a year?
Yeah.
Can we come back to you and tell you what we really think the time is to dig into the 17 sites and so forth, and follow the motion, and then direct me to give you the time at the next meeting? I'd like to confer with the senior team to give real accuracy, and then come back with the potential where we go. I just ask for that particular, perhaps a bit of flexibility.
Go ahead, David.
I think it's fair to do that, because if we're expecting you to use a third party, we have to choose someone.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to know their availability. However, if we anticipate it being a year, I would like to see recommendations from the current principal on what can be done moving into the next budget process to make some initial improvements. We've heard of one thing by adjusting the schedule. What can we do in the interim while this study's going on?
Through you, Chair, Trustee McDonald, I think that, I'm not going to speak for Jeff at the back end, they have worked on the first report you received on the Charter 47. And they have a good idea of some things they got to do there, and much of that, I think, will have implications for Tier Leger, and we'd like to get at that. I personally like to get at that for September, and that's why I did not think that Trustee McAllister was really pushing me ambitiously. I think that's something we ought to get at. I would like to think that will come out as I respond to the May one to you about what we're looking as potential solutions for that tracking of students. And as Trustee Swan has said, to become more precise and accurate where the kids are in our head count as we go through. So I think that we'll expand that to bring that to May 1st, and I hope that's fair.
Yeah, take that out. Because David, if you can, so the motion is that we ask the Upper Canada School Board to review and examine Tier Leger process by a third-party provider. So at the board meeting, that's when we'll direct you. And maybe in the next 2 weeks, you can start to put your head around some timelines, and then we can have that added to the board meeting. Okay?
That's fair.
Is that good?
That's good.
So the motion moved by Trustee McPherson, seconded by, I'll come to you in a second here, Trustee McDonald. Okay, yeah. Seconded by Trustee McMillan, that the Committee of the Whole recommend the Upper Canada District School Board review and examine Tier Leger process. To review the program, Tier Leger program.
Yeah.
To review the Tier Leger program. To be conducted by a third party. You go ahead and call the question, please. Thanks, everyone. Oh, sorry, Trustee Buckland. Sorry, can you stop that?
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Chairman. In the examination review, what I would hope is that it would also seek opportunities for a potential increase of this school, and I could see that as a political lobbying tool. We could do this if we had more funding. I would like that to be included.
Through you, Chair, to Trustee Buckland, I really believe that there are the two boards in the province that really have created this gem, the Peel District School Board and our board. And you may remember a principal who's now retired down in Florida, who was a major leader in this at the time. He worked very closely with two principals in Peel to pull us off in both areas. The vision for this in Peel, they moved to rapidly, is that they've actually moved outside their boundaries too. They moved into Toronto and Halton and parts of Durham and so forth. And I think they're upwards in the neighborhood of upwards to like 50 centers across. I think that this real solid look, third-party look at the foundation we've created, there may very well, as Trustee Carter said, we've expanded to 3 spots. And I think there's potential in this move to realize that this adults come back to school, the 18 to 21-year-olds, this is going to be very important how we stand. So I think that will be a part of it, and I think we have to inspire and innovate at this particular time, and I hear that the trustees are asking for that. I think we also have to honor our friends at Augustosity, where we're making a move into that community, and I think that we've only tapped the surface there as well. And as we take a look, I think that the river thing should not get in the way, and I think the new bridge will help us do that.
Less congestion.
Okay,
Put it up here?
we're good? Hot the question.
I'm in favor of these.
Trustee Karkner is out of the building. Trustee Swan. You still with us, Trustee Swan?
She's voted, yes.
Okay, that's great. We have your vote now. Okay, good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Now, is there anything from this agenda item that we want to talk about? Anything else? The only other piece that I'll leave, and I think it's something that we need to discuss through the budget process, is that one of the things that's become evident is that we have to examine, I think, at maybe carrying some type of a planned reserve to ensure that we can deal with these variances. I think that's something that we need to think about as a board, maybe enacting through policy. Okay, there's nothing else, then we'll move on then. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Dawes. Next item, you're still up. Trustee boundaries. So you have before, this is something that we need to do every term. And it's one of these kind of awkward processes, to be honest. You're supposed to do it using the numbers from the most current numbers, but those current numbers are not made available to us until after. Well, I don't believe you still have them, do you, Mr. Dawes?
Not yet, no.
So we're already in February and we still don't have the actual current numbers. So that's a bit of a joke, and I find it puzzling that trustees are asked to adjust their boundaries, to consider adjusting their boundaries after the election has already been called. However, this is the situation we're in, so Mr. Dawes, you want to just hit the highlights here?
Through you, Chair, can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
Or is it not possible to adjust the date so this is done after the election date versus before the new trustees come in?
It can be done. I mean, I don't know that it can be, it can be done at any time. I don't think there's any reason it can't be. The tradition is, and what boards do, is that they take the data when it's provided to them by the municipalities, and they use that to calculate the numbers. So it's traditionally done by boards in the end of the third year, beginning of the fourth year. Many boards do it after January, but we can do it, and that we can discuss tonight at any time.
Thank you. I'll have comments.
Okay, Mr. Dawes, I'll just have Mr. Dawes do his report, and then we'll look for questions. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dawes.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, before I begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Lisa Raymond. She's been instrumental in helping put together this report, so thank you, Lisa. As you've suggested, Chair, in accordance with the Education Act, the board is required to confirm its trustee determination and distribution by March the 31st. We have in the past, and we decided this year again, to request through MPAC, that's the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, access to early population figures that they could give to us so we could receive an earlier indication as to whether or not trustees would want to consider any change in ward structures. And so that's what I'm providing to you tonight. It's simply information that you may want to consider, may not. Again, it's not based on the actual data that we're supposed to receive from MPAC. That data is supposed to come next week, is my understanding. So that's what I just wanted to take you through right now. And I'll be quick. But in your package, you've got a map of the currently existing ward structures. And all we've really looked at is the population data to develop what we call electoral quotient. And you're probably familiar with this functionality. In a perfect situation, you'd have an electoral quotient of 1.0 per electoral ward. But of course, the electoral wards don't come in situations where you've got equally distributed populations. So we have this calculation called electoral quotient. And that's all we were looking at from this data to get a sense as to whether or not trustees would want to consider any sort of change in ward structures. So included in your package is a table that shows the distribution between wards based upon this preliminary population data that we have received from MPAC. And what we saw was that there was one particular area that trustees might want to consider in an attempt to improve electoral quotient. And what we noticed was ward number 7 with an electoral quotient of 0.78 appeared to be a bit on the low side, and trustee ward 10 with an electoral quotient of 1.34 looked a bit on the high side. And because these are adjoining wards, that maybe there was a change in ward structure that would improve that electoral quotient between those two ward areas. So in putting our best thoughts to this, we were only able to come up with 3 possible scenarios. The extent to which these are reasonable, of course, we'll leave to you. I just wanted to put them on the table because these were the only ones that we could come up with, again, as an attempt to improve those electoral quotients. One of them is called option 1 in your package, and it examines the possibility of changing Russell from Ward 10 to Ward 7. So that would increase the electoral ward quotient at Ward 7, and it would decrease it a bit in Ward 10. The second option, we looked at the possibility of moving Champlain, Hawkesbury, and East Hawkesbury to Ward 9, and then subsequently trying to find that balance by moving North Stormont to Ward 7. That was option 2. And then the third and final option was similar, moving Champlain, Hawkesbury, and East Hawkesbury again to Ward 9, and instead of North Stormont, moving South Stormont to Ward 7. And so in each of those options, we've provided for you the electoral quotient for each of those wards for your consideration. Thank you.
In fairness to the Phil and Lisa, it was management council, and I'll take responsibility, that really pushed them to come up with more than one. They initially presented one, and I thought that we needed the benefit of having alternatives. So I don't fault them for maybe looking very creatively at this. I think that they were just doing what they were asked to do. All right, so comments. Trustee McPherson.
Okay, I'll lead off. This is not a personal issue, and I've sat here close to 14 years, and we've done it every time we've come up to an election. Some years we make changes, some years we don't. Some years we make changes that are highly unpopular, but that's part of the rationale for sitting here. We're not always popular. It's not a personal move. It's about achieving a balance in the electoral representation of the board. Ideally, we need to come as close to one as we can. And I looked at the 3 scenarios, and one stands out that comes close to that, and that is the first option that's presented. I also don't think we should be increasing the geographic size of an already large ward even more, and that's one of the other options. The last time we did this, we moved 4 municipalities in 4 different wards. There was substantial shift before the last election. And it doesn't reflect upon the ability of the sitting trustee or anything like that. It's more about achieving balance. And when you look at the preliminary numbers, one pops out. That you have one ward that is sitting at 1.34 and the adjacent ward is pointing at 0.78. And when you speak about when we should do it, if I remember correctly, it has to be done when the election writ is dropped, which is already in January because nominations are now open. But the municipalities have to be able to prepare their voters lists in time for the fall election. So the time is now. I believe it says before the 31st of March.
Yeah, I think the only thing that is up for interpretation is when the effective date is.
Yeah.
We can make it effective whenever. We could make it effective for 2018.
Yeah, well, that's up to you. Your thoughts.
Okay. Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've heard the rationalizations. I've studied the options. I'm still confounded by it all. Recently, I was watching a presentation by an individual who was new to an area but had power, though had never lived in the area, made very extensive changes to the territory. And if you want me to be the Dowager Duchess from Downton Abbey, I'm prepared to do that. But this doesn't really make any sense. Now, I don't mind picking up more territory. That's more schools in these districts. What is the point of it? Come to one. Well, is that a factor? Even with the changes, we don't get majority of trustees at one. And maybe the big question to ask is why have we fallen back in Dundas? You know, is it natural atrophy of students? Is it acquiescence to a narrower structure in school system education? Is it a decline in virility? I mean, I don't know what it is. Now, these aren't in my area, these aren't my townships, these aren't my schools, but I live there. I'm very familiar with the ones I have. I'm not familiar with the ones that are proposed in 2 and 3. The campaign is already underway. Now, you have not seen my television advertising yet, but I mean, why would you now say, well, yes, you're committed to this area, but we're going to change the area? So my suggestion is to refer this and decide it after the election. Thank you.
Just to refresh everybody's knowledge on how this is calculated, it's not based on students. It's based on the number of residents who have ticked off, I'm a public school board supporter. And just as a note, the last time we did this, there were 205,110 public school board supporters, and there are currently 203,630, difference of 0.7% in the numbers being used to generate this one. So it's not that Dundas County has lost students or has fewer students or fewer proportion of students. I think that it has far more to do with proximity and volume to Ottawa.
Through you, Chair?
You're on next, Trustee Swan.
It also means, as a public school board supporter, that they could be grandparents or just people that have no children that are school board supporters. Is that not correct?
Yep, we represent them all. correct. Trustee Carpenter?
I'm not quite sure where to start, but I know that everyone's very aware that the ward that is being affected by these scenarios is the one that I represent. When I ran for trustee back in 2010, it was at 1.17, which was the highest at that time for the distribution by each of the wards, according to the data that I have here. I am not in favor of breaking up Prescott-Russell, which is Ward 10, for several reasons. We're up against many issues in our area, and I'm not saying they aren't in the other areas as well, but language is one, and we have multiple schools for our families to choose from, for their children to attend. Breaking up the county structure in relation to the schools would make it even more confusing for the communities in which are within my ward. We have several community agencies that work very closely with our schools in Prescott-Russell, and only in Prescott-Russell, some of them. And if the move is to split up Prescott-Russell, we might not be able to benefit from those services as well as we are right now, and working with our senior staff at the same time. Yeah, the municipalities in Prescott-Russell, of which there are several, have a unique structure within Prescott-Russell amongst their mayors. The mayors get together, they call themselves the Prescott-Russell County Council, and they get together to discuss how to make Prescott-Russell better. And that has been successful for many years. I don't have the date when that all began, but it certainly is working very well for the mayors and the communities in which they represent. I have a question for Mr. Dawes or for the director. Could we receive the MPAC data every year?
I believe we could every year. The tradition for this board and most boards across the province is as the Chair Peter said, is to do it at this particular time. But I believe that this is something that could be examined yearly if the board, and then to be acted on prior to the election.
Mr. Dawes?
Through you, Chair, just to clarify, we received this data at our request to MPAC, but certainly we'd be able and willing to engage a conversation with MPAC to see if we could access it at a specified time prior to elections.
The reason I'm asking that question, if I may continue, is that I can see this needing some change, perhaps. I would like to see the change take place in line for the 2018 elections. We have 4 years. This could be worked on by the trustees by looking at the data that comes from MPAC. And looking at the data between 2010 and 2014, there are more public school supporters in the Prescott-Russell area. They've gone up except for one area, which is Castleman. And Castleman is quite a francophone area. So that's an area that needs to be addressed and marketed and more visible. Upper Canada needs to be more visible there. So I'm just very concerned about all of those options. I will not vote in favor of any one of them if it comes to a vote. But I would like to see this put out as a study for the trustees in the years to come, 2016 particularly. And if you need a motion to get that discussed, I'm willing to proceed with a motion.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. So the information represents the electoral base. I'm not sure that we as trustees hear from every one of those electorates on a given year, and perhaps if we think about the number of parents that we have, we would hear from all those parents. So I guess the perfect scenario, the perfect balance to be at one is a bit of a balancing effect to make sure we represent our constituents the best way possible. So we need to be aware of that. We need to look at that. And if it grows, exponentially, can we represent our areas if it grows too much? Are we serving the needs of our constituents? I don't have an answer. I just think it's something we need to think about. One of the things we do need to think about as well, though, is and be aware of is that we know that the Russell Rockland area is a very growth predominant area right now for us. The default support that you get when you have a new house, when you move, if you haven't classified anything else, is English public. The only time you really look at that is when you get your assessment or when you go to vote. It doesn't have anything to do with who gets what kind of money. It's just voting regulations, voting opportunity. So I would hazard to guess that nobody does anything until they show up to the polling station and say, well, no, that's not what I want. My child goes to this school. And so I think the information that we have today could very much change the day after the election in the fall. And so we're basing it on what we think we have as far as an electoral base. But the information could change very, very quickly as soon as those people come to vote and say, I want my support to be here. It could go up as well, and I'm hopeful for that. But I'm not certain that we make a decision based on relationships, because we want to make a decision based on how we represent our constituents. I'm not certain that the information is valid enough for us to make the adjustment today, and I think timing needs to be done. I guess I'm not supporting the idea that it has to be done in 2016, because I think this information changes pretty dramatically from year to year in the growth area. I think if we want to do this going into the election for 2018, then we specify that we want the information by December 2017 so that we can make those decisions moving forward. There's a requirement for us to make sure that we select those boundaries so that municipal clerks can say, here's who is on the ballot. And depending on that area, we need to make sure that we register in those areas if we're choosing to run again. Somebody that lives in Dundas could have to register in Russell because it's the largest municipality now, if that were the change. So I'm quite content leaving this the way it is for now. I'm not completely satisfied that Russell really needs to move at this point. But I am not supporting the idea that we deal with this in 2016 either.
Okay. Any other? Trustee McPherson.
Through the chair, if I may say so bold as to make a suggestion. I believe Mr. Dawes has indicated that the current information is soon to be with us. Am I correct in that? No? It would be my suggestion that this go back to staff instead of us trying to discuss it and give direction tonight, that in 2 weeks' time it comes back with a recommendation from staff and we can move on it then. That's just a suggestion. I know when you start moving boundaries around and taking pieces away, it sometimes it's hard not to be personal about this because we all work very hard with our schools. I know if somebody came to me and said that you're going to lose such and such a municipality, I would be concerned, but I would be also assured that we work for all students here, not just the ones in our own ward.
Through you, Chair?
Yep, go ahead, Trustee Swan.
I was not a trustee before the last election, and Augusta got moved into Brockville, and I was very upset about it because I didn't think, as a person, it was a good fit, because 90% of the children in Augusta, or maybe more, feed into the South Grenville family of schools. And so I think we have to look at this whole, I understand the numbers that was presented tonight. Brockville only had 0.69, so they want to up it. But then when I look at Ward 4, which is Trustee McAllister's ward, it's like there's a lot of schools in his ward that do feed into Brockville. So I think the whole picture has to be looked at by us as trustees with our input to our family of schools and everything. I think it would be far more effective if we can try and group, now that we have the family of schools, try and group them within our wards as well. Thank you. I would like to support a motion to put this off till next year, or however we have to do it to conform to ministry standards. Thank you.
Trustee McAllister.
I agree with trustees Buckland, Karkner, McDonald, and Swan with regard to their rationales. And trustee McPherson, I do understand your idea of referral to staff for further study. However, I do think that that is our responsibility, not a staff responsibility. And I'm prepared to make a motion to the effect that the issue of trustee boundaries be examined by December 2017 for implementation, if necessary, for 2018 and the ensuing election.
Seconding that? Do you have that on a piece of paper written down, Mr. McAllister? Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Anybody want to speak to the motion? So that's to compile a report no later. I think you really want it before. What is the date? Do you have?
Through you, Chair.
Last time we started we actually had to present. We did it last time. We presented it for the first time at the beginning of November in order to give communities a chance to respond before. So if last time we had it the first meeting of November, and we had public presentations done in December, and I think then we voted on it in January. So you'd need to have the information presented before December.
You said December?
Sure, September is fine.
I would be willing to adjust that motion to take that into effect.
I think that the board requests the numbers. You start in September with the numbers, and then maybe October, the trustees get the first look at it. That's what I would say. So here's all the issues are going to be examined prior to December 2017. Administration to request updated impact data September 2017. Go ahead, Trustee Karkner.
Do we need a motion prior to that saying that we remain at status quo for
Yep.
the 2014 election?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can we
Yep.
do it after,
Yep.
before, whatever?
We can do it after. We got a motion on the floor now.
Okay.
It's moved by Trustee McAllister and seconded by Trustee McDonald. Trustee McAllister? Trustee McPherson?
If you're going to put it off for essentially 4 years, why don't you just pass a simple motion saying that at this point we're going to maintain the status quo and forget about passing a motion to the next board, directing them to do something? Like, it seems you're shoving it so far off in the future. Well, when you look at the numbers, we've got a problem right now, but you do not want to address it. So let's say maintain the status quo and let the next board decide what to do about it.
Okay. Trustee Buckland?
Well, I think we need time to examine it, and I mean, you look. Here's a specific oddity in the city of Cornwall. Looking at the number of English public school supporters, the trustee there has to hustle quite a bit more than in Brockville, which is a town half the size, and yet nearly as many English public supporters. So there are a lot of things involved in this, not just a matter of splitting up townships and counties.
I'll come to you in a second. I'll throw my 2 cents in on this motion. I think that there is some advantage to getting it organized sooner rather than later. It's one of those things that is easily forgotten. And I also think that we're going to have to negotiate with our impact partners to make sure that they do a better job, because right now I think they're hanging on to the legislation, and the reg says February 15th or something, I think. So I think we're going to have to establish a relationship. So I think that we're going to need to start much sooner than we think in order to make sure that we have good numbers, as Trustee McDonald says they change. So I think that we're going to have to try. So I would add that into the debate on that. We're talking just about the motion now. Trustee McDonald?
I was just gonna, I'll echo what you say. I think we're not forcing the next board to do anything. All we're doing is saying, we want the next board to get the information sooner. Every board has to make a decision about boundaries. And we're just saying, that next board should get the information by September of that preceding year. So, we'll make the motion, the following motion, to say we're satisfied with status quo at this point. But, we're not, my presumption is that we're not forcing the board to make any decision one way or the other. It's up to them at that point.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the motion itself?
I just have a comment.
Yep.
In regards to Trustee Buckland's comment that, a board, if you have higher numbers, that the trustee doesn't have to hustle as much. I take offense to that, whether it be Brockville, Augusta, or us that have under one as our numbers. It's up to you how much you hustle. It's up to you how much you go to your schools. It's up to you how many calls you take from your parents and return the calls, and how many council meetings you attend. And I just think that was a very inappropriate comment. Thank you.
Trustees, I think it's fair to say that you disagree. But I'm uncomfortable when we go then the next step of saying that it's inappropriate. I think if it's truly inappropriate, then I think that's a code of conduct thing. So I appreciate what you're saying, Trustee Swan, but I'm uncomfortable with you going as far as that you think it's inappropriate. I think you can disagree, and I think you stated that, but I wish that that's where we leave our comments, is that we disagree with what is said. I think that would be more appropriate.
Can we call a question, please?
Yep. Call a question. McDonald. Yep.
Can you read the motion?
That the Committee of the Whole recommend the Upper Canada District School, be it resolved that the issue of trustee boundaries be examined prior to December 2017 administration request MPAC data by September 2017. That's it. No, I don't have it.
We want, the December 2017 should be September 2017.
Okay, so let me read it again. Be it resolved, the issue of trustee boundaries be examined prior to December 2017, and administration request MPEG dated by September 2017.
Yeah, the difficulty with that motion is that
You can start looking at it
We could,
anytime after September.
But the intent was that we get the information brought to the board in September 2017. So administration have to do whatever they need to do to get the information to us. That was we.
Okay. Okay. Be it resolved that the trustees receive a report based on current MPEC data for September for a discussion September 2017. Okay? I got it?
So we can erase the rest of it?
Yeah, you can get rid of everything else. And in fact, we still are in committee of the whole, so we really only can recommend this to the board at this point, okay? Yep, so it's the committee of the whole recommend the Upper Canada District School Board receive a report based on current impact data for discussion September 2017. That's what it reads right now. Okay, go ahead. Trustee Swan?
Sorry, it's just saying what I see is, be it resolved, we receive a report based on MPAC decisions, but it's not saying the whole motion or resolution.
Okay, well, this is what I have. The committee of the whole recommend the Upper Canada District School Board receive a report based on current MPEC data for discussion September 2017. That's the official motion.
In regards to boundaries, maybe should be added?
That's what MPAC report is.
Well, we're too late now. We're too late now to change the wording.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so we have one abstention, Trustee Swan. We have one opposed, Trustee McPherson. All others are in favor. All right, so that passes. Trustee McDonald. Want to move a motion to put status quo?
I do.
I'll second it.
Okay. That's good. The committee of the whole recommend the apprentice school board.
Maintain the current boundary structure.
Just maintain the current boundary structure for the 2014 election. The one thing that I think that we have to kind of walk the line on as a board, and having been through these a couple times now, is that it's kind of an awkward thing for us to be involved in, you know, and most governance structures give this kind of decision making to a third party. You know, it leads to a lot of very difficult decisions that I think that you have to be careful when you discuss it as a board, that you can see how quickly the conversation moves around. So I just leave that with you. So the motion that I have right now, moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Karkner, that committee of the whole recommend the Upper Canada District School Board maintain the current boundary structure for the 2014 election.
Can I make it, I just have a comment.
Yep.
On what you were just talking about, putting yourself in a really tough situation if it was a third party. It also places me in a very tough situation too, because my boundary doesn't change at all, and it won't. You know, and the whole idea. And when you look around at the number of trustees here, you have 11. I'm the 11th. You know, I could be put in a very strange predicament if it was 5 and 5. You know, if you were looking at any one option. And that really, it concerns me a lot. You know, sometimes I feel like I should abstain from these type of decisions, or, you know, and this vote.
You take the same oath we do, Trustee Garrow.
Yeah. But it's just, anyway, but
Awkward.
I like the discussion, looking at the options. And that's
Trustee
what it is.
McPherson?
Picking up on what both you and Peter have said, what would be wrong with making a third party part of the process?
Well, maybe that's what can be decided
Maybe
next.
what we need is, instead of it being staff, somebody looking at the numbers and coming back and saying, this is what we recommend.
Through you, Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
My concern about a third party is it's just another cost to the board that we're taking away from our students in the classroom.
Okay, all right, so right now we don't need to worry about that, because we're voting to vote. The motion right now is to maintain the current boundary structure. So, please call the question. We gotta get off page 1 here. Yes, you do. Okay, that passes with one abstention by Trustee McPherson. Accountability Framework update, First Vice Chair McMillan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I feel a little bad taking time away from Phil Dawes, seeing he's been on most of the night, but I will do my best, Phil. It's the accountability framework. It was really nice, just as an early comment, to to note that critical success factors was mentioned, terminology that comes from the accountability framework, and that the director also mentioned one of our key result indicators that we are looking at down the road, and that's looking at what our graduates are going to be doing, and have we served them well enough to have them go beyond us, and what are they doing with the skills that we give them. So it's nice to see that, because it tells us on the committee, and it should tell us all at the board, that the accountability framework is certainly being paid a close attention to. We are a board that strives on getting better. And in the process of getting better, the accountability framework has what we call key result indicators. And the Net Promoter Score is one of those key result indicators. By itself, it does not paint the whole picture, but it does tell us part of the story. And back in November, we had a report that basically told us that over the last year, this was our second report, that we had maintained our ground. And we had not lost any ground in terms of what had happened over a tough year, which was a good thing. Also, out of the report, there did come things that I think were worth listening to, because we were talking to people that are outside our school community. And so in our meeting on January 21st, in the Accountability Committee meeting, we discussed the results of the Net Promoter Score survey that was completed and reported to us. And at that time, we discussed the possibility, and that's what I'm bringing to you right now to discuss this, that we asked the administration to focus on, I believe it's the top four.
Choose from the top six.
That's right.
Four of the top six.
That's right. 4 of the top 6 of the areas that our detractors had brought to our attention. Now, I noticed a couple of board meetings ago, our director did talk about some of those things, for example, class size and lack of funding. And those are some of the things that came out of comments by our detractors. So this being part of the puzzle, being one part, but a very important part, it's giving us valuable information that we can use in terms of improving as a board and improving in terms of our messaging. So what I'm recommending to the board is that we have that in front of me here.
It's not really. I have it sort of figured out.
All right, that we ask the administration, ask the director,
to select 4 of the top 6 detractors identified within the Net Promoter Score results, and develop a plan to address those 4 results.
That's right, with the intention that there will be another Net Promoter Score next year, and that we will see improvement in those areas. So that, I open that up for you, Chair, for discussion, comments.
So we have a number of things that we can look at here. We can look at, and this is what we need to do with the data that comes back to us, is assess it, and then establish some goals or targets. If I might, the Accountability Framework Committee did not come up with, thought that in this particular case that we would allow the director to select those ones that he wanted to address first, and we have not set targets, although that certainly is an option. This being the first time that we've looked at something like this, we left it a little bit more open than perhaps coming out of the gate and saying, we want an X% decrease in this as being a reason why you are not giving the Upper Canada District School Board a high Net Promoter Score. So just for your information, the top 6 are school funding, programming, standard of teaching, class sizes, staffing, and bullying. Any comments or questions? Trustee McCrae?
So through you, Chair, are you asking us to, as a group, to select what the four might be? No?
No, we're gonna leave that up to the director.
Okay.
The motion is asking for him to look at the top 6 and select 4.
Okay.
Okay, pose the question then. The committee of the whole direct administration to select 4 of the 6 top main issues facing the Upper Canada District School Board identified within the Net Promoter Score survey results and develop a plan to address those 4 main issues. Okay. Oh yeah, moved by Trustee McMillan and seconded by Trustee McDonald. Okay, go ahead. Okay, Trustee Buckland?
The adjective main, Mr. Chairman, is one that I don't think is appropriate here because we've listed all the issues on your sheet. And to say, something at 3% is a main issue, I would question.
Okay.
If you just eliminated the adjective, I would like that.
We're a little late though. Sorry. We're waiting on your vote. You're our last vote.
I will succumb.
Thanks.
Persuasive consensus.
Yeah. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. It's a good start to page 2. Okay, we're going to move even faster now with the debenture bylaw. We see these things occasionally. They're to deal with debenture requirements, debt requirements to fund construction preliminary landscaping costs of North Grenville under the capital priorities funding, and the amount is $543,471. And you're moved by Trustee McPherson, seconded by Trustee Garrow. Any comments or questions? Just as a note that we'll soon see an end of these, as they're going to be consolidating these debentures in Toronto, and we won't have to keep voting on them. So, a good thing. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Now I need a motion to move back into the regular board meeting. Trustee Karkner, Trustee McCray. Okay, that passes unanimously. Report from private session, January 22nd, 2014. 1 personnel and 1 contractual matter were discussed. No recommendations are being brought forward to the board. Report from public session, January 22nd, 2014. 2 presentations, 1 discussion item were presented, and no recommendations are being brought forward. Move now to the status of the March 7th PA Day, paid or unpaid for OSSTF, FO regular permanent teachers. You have a report in front of you. This is just to provide an update and information to trustees. I don't think we need a motion. We don't need a motion. This is just to provide information. Any comments or questions? Okay, move now to a cancellation request of the board meeting of March 5th, 2014. Despite our best efforts to try to come up with a set of bylaws that deals with every eventuality, we've not done that. Moved by Trustee McDonald that the Upper Canada District School Board cancel the board meeting of March 5th, 2014 This is because the following week is March break, but the previous week we have a meeting, so we didn't see the need to have meetings back to back. Seconded by Trustee Karkner. Any comments or questions? Okay, go ahead and call the question. Who's the question? Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, Trustee Karkner has been acting as our liaison with the Champions for Kids, and are you going to be giving a verbal report, or?
Is the written report wasn't attached.
Okay, sorry.
So, I can just give highlights of that written report, and if there's
Okay.
any questions, I'll.
Go ahead.
All right, the annual meeting was held in Cornwall on at the end of January, and I attended as the trustee liaison. The foundation approved the dispersal of $138,000, fully or partially, to fully or partially fund 397 students throughout our board. The process is that principals submit applications on behalf of the students that they want these funds to go towards. That there's a process. They receive information from parents and teachers. 75 different schools submitted applications throughout this past year, and it's very amazing. We've heard some stories during the session that many lives have been changed because of the Champions for Kids funding. Some of the things that were supported by this were sports registrations, summer camp programs, dance and drama lessons, supporting struggling families, and the list goes on and on. The foundation raised over $210,000 during 2012-2013, and this is a result of several fundraising events throughout our board, community sponsorships, and payroll deductions. And the communities and our employees are indeed supportive and generous. Since its inception, the foundation has raised $829,000, and the hope is that we reach the 1 million mark this particular year. And I'm sure that will happen. There's a lot of things planned for the future for this coming year, organized by volunteers, and volunteers throughout our board and in the communities. And I encourage everyone to be part of these events if you can, or to make a personal donation to the foundation. Our students benefit from all the efforts in our schools, workplaces, and communities. So we continue to put students first. That's my report, Chair.
Are there any questions?
It's in here. It's in the background. It's all in the background.
Okay, we all, I think, can attest to the good that comes from the students that we're able to help, and I'm sure have all heard very powerful stories about how these gifts are changing trajectory, as the director likes to speak about it, of many of our students. So thank you.
I just
Yep, go ahead.
apologize to our trustee liaison. It is in the body of the background.
Yep.
My apologies.
Okay, thank you very much. Director of OPSBA, Director.
Just a quick update for you. Our next board of directors is in 2 weeks' time, but one thing I just wanted to bring to trustees' attention is Bill 122 is still standing. I'm still waiting for Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly to debate or to be dealt with. And to this date, we have no confirmed date for that committee to discuss that matter. So that's from my own personal perspective, it's something that I'll be asking more information on Board of Directors. Not so much on Bill 122, but on the plan that OPSPA has to address what would happen if Bill 122 was passed today. So I'd like to see some information that I can bring back to our board table.
Okay.
Other than that, Mr. Chair, there's nothing else that I have.
Anybody else want to add anything? Trustee Garrow?
Yeah, just that the charter that this board had passed a charter commitment for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. A lot of boards have come forward and have passed a similar motion, and as well as that, even as we speak in the next few weeks, others are entertaining it, and hopefully it'll be a lot passed. And after our board of directors meeting, I'll report on it. And also, I'm getting a number of calls and emails about the Prime Minister and our National Chief, Sean Atleo, presenting a piece of an act, an opportunity for First Nations, which I have to respond to at the Board of Directors. That's it.
Trustee Carkner?
The program committee met the night before PES began, and two things on the agenda were the upcoming mental health conference that's coming up, sponsored by OBSPA, and just to get the word out that we would like to see representatives from our board, not necessarily trustees, but employees and community people who work in the mental health aspect as part of our board. So I hope that people will consider applying to go to that, and I have some flyers here if people want to have a look at them. And the second one was EQAO. We went through the surveys that were done around the province and the different groups that provided input, and OBSPA is creating a report to the ministry on EQAO with some recommendations as well.
Okay. Anything else? No student report this time? No. Director, thanks very much to Trustee Garrow, Trustee Carkner, and Trustee McDonald for providing us an update.
Thank you, Chair Petersman, for the opportunity to leave a couple of things for our trustees to think about over the next little while. I think, as was said around the table, Trustee McPherson began it, is we're in for, I think, a couple of difficult budgets. I think as you take a look at this and the way the dance is going towards this next year, Peel Board of Education is starting a very political process of lighting up its system. They have brought their principals in and given them all the messages. They're bringing all their school councils in, and they're sending their trustees out in the communities to raise quite a commotion about the special education funding. There are many reasons for their low funding, and there's many reasons why we are funded above the provincial average. But I say this to you very quickly, and I want you to understand this. I've said at Code to all of my colleagues, and how I said it was this way. I said to Tony Pontus, the director, I said 27 below is really cold in Toronto, but it's even colder in Eastern Ontario because we have a damp cold. I said, Tony, what I'm telling you is that if you think your 27 below is worse than ours, it's not fair. You have a funding formula that perhaps hurts you in the one side, that you're not getting the amount that you like per student, but there are other envelopes that you have. And I said, if you open up one, you open up them all. And the reason I say this is that this Board of Trustees 10 years ago, 9 years ago, really made a courageous decision not to give in to a request, it was actually an order, to send $10 million back from a reserve in special education. And we didn't. In fact, it caused a great deal of trouble. I was called down every 6 weeks to Toronto, had my wrist slapped. I enjoyed Rick's company in the car each time, and every time I took someone else with me, and Ian was a regular customer and appreciated my driving. But the fact is, we were benchmarked against that spending, and that has helped us out for special education. Other boards have had money taken away as well, and they chose different stances as they go through, and you live with your decisions. Long term, that was a powerfully good decision for all of the students in our board in Eastern Ontario. I want you to have your wits about you, and I know you do, at the public sessions with other trustees and so forth, is that we have to make sure that our voice is clearly heard. We enjoy a status in our meetings in Toronto. You guys have done really good work. They listen to me when I'm down there too, but This one here is very important for us in light of presentations you saw tonight as you go through. If we open up an envelope, and it's the only envelope open up, we will lose some money and resources for the kids that come into our board. And so I think we have to have a balance. I'm not saying that Peel should not have this addressed, but you can't pick one apple out of the tree. You have to pick them all. And I think the envelope they've chosen to pick is a good envelope, but I think there's other envelopes, ESL, transportation, a variety of envelopes that should be addressed as well. I say that because our voice has to be heard, and it will be. The next one is, I want to go beyond a rumor to this, but there is, when Gabe Sakali, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Finance and Education, rumored quite strongly that potentially a 1 or 2% cut in the GSNs. For us, that potentially is $3.5 million. For Toronto, it's 60 or 70. For Peel, it's 35, etc. Big dollars as you go through. And I remind you, it will not come from the contract lines where you pay people. It's going to come from the discretionary that we do our creative things to serve our communities effectively. So I'm not here to fearmonger, but I am saying we have done a good job of advocating for our students and advocating for Eastern Ontario. I think at this particular time, knowledge will serve us really, really well. And I think with the shared knowledge that we get from OPSPA, the shared knowledge we have from talking to people right time, will be critical. I think our leadership right now is important not only for our board, but our leadership will be needed for the province. And many of you have very good platforms to speak on. And as we hear, and Janet McDougall, the chair of Peel, will do a good job of stating her case. And we must say, yeah, we agree with you, Janet. You're not served right, but let's talk about the entire thing. You can't pick one particular piece to go at. And I do want the kids in Peel to be served properly. We all want that. It's social justice, it's equity, and all those things. But let's make it we look at the whole picture and not pick one part of the picture. So thank you, Chair, for that moment. I'm not sending you down out through the highways to be worried, but I think we have to be properly knowledgeable about what the future may hold for us. Thank you.
Okay. That's great. We're done. Motion to adjourn. Trustee McMillan, Trustee McPherson. Everybody's in favor. Passes. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.